going to go ahead and get started. My name is Steph Chalk, and I'm Executive Director of the Plan Sponsor University. And we today look forward to going over what we would normally run for individuals who have been with us, as well as individuals who are joining us for the first time, just a training in how we provide an overview of TPSU and the TPSU programs. So to kick us off in this very first segment, I'm going to be introducing Fred Barstein, the founder and CEO of the Plan Sponsor University, as well as the Retirement Advisor University. And Fred, can you take it away, please?
Very good. Thank you, Steph. And I wanted to extend a warm welcome. I've been looking at the weather all over the country, and it's pretty cold, in the north. But I just see Mike Roberts. San Diego is pretty good too. But it's about 75 degrees right now. I've got some echo. DJ, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Fred, I went ahead and muted everybody. I'm gonna go. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. But if everybody can, if you're not speaking, keep yourselves on mute, and then just unmute when you're going to talk.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, warm welcome. Usually we have these programs in person, and we have it either at PGA or in Jupiter, and it's a really great event, and I get to see everybody. But this year, obviously with COVID, we can't do that. So what we want to try to do is give you a sense of how the programs work, even for people who have done it already. You know, we're always adjusting and changing. And for those of you who have just done it a couple of times, it gives you real insight into how these programs are conducted and what we do, what goes into it. We don't have to show you everything that we do, but I think it's important you understand what we're doing. And we're always looking for feedback. We're always looking for ways that we can improve and upgrade this. And, you know, we've been doing this since 2013. So I guess we're going into our 9th year. You know, we've made some major adjustments in some ways. And in some ways, you know, it does look a lot like it has in the past. So I am just going to talk a little bit about the changes that we've seen, who is behind this, the people that are supporting the program, the stats, and what's happened in 2020, the different things that we've seen. Obviously, the biggest thing that is on everyone's mind and really, you know, affected us tremendously was COVID. I think we had our last program on March 12th. We did an in-person program, if you could believe it, as well as virtual in the middle of June in Alpharetta, Georgia. And then we went virtual starting in July. And I think we did about 35 virtual programs on that. And there were, you know, opportunities and challenges, things that will continue in 2021, even when we are able to go in person, and obviously challenges. You know, there's no denying that meeting with people in person and you know, seeing them face to face and getting to spend a lot of time with them is really, really valuable. And you can't be replaced by a virtual. But on the other hand, and you know, the engagement is not even close to what it is in a virtual. And the other, you know, big thing that we've seen has been very, very helpful for TPSU is being on a college campus. It gives us a different feel than most industry meetings, and certainly meetings like this. And you can't do that on virtual. On the other hand, for a lot of plan sponsors, it's better for them to attend virtually. So we are going to continue, even when we go in person, to allow people to come in remotely. It allows for recruiting in areas where we know people aren't going to drive from. And I think that certainly during the COVID crisis, the virtual allows people to get CE through TPSU, and it's hard for them to get CE in this environment, given that there are fewer and fewer meetings available to them. I think it's also important that in this COVID, prospecting is a challenge. You're not able to meet people face to face like you had in the past, and this is maybe an alternative, certainly a good alternative, but doesn't certainly replace being in person. But I think that the prospecting is good. So there's a lot of benefit, a lot of challenges. So why don't we just get into some of the program and the stats. So Steph, if you could go to the next slide. I think it's important for people to know who's behind this. So obviously I'm involved and I don't have a role, and that's designed. I will come to your programs, and on the virtual, we will do introductions, and I think it's important that we're doing those introductions because we can give you endorsements, and it also makes it feel like it's a TPSU program versus a marketing program by you. And I will do that as much as I can. And when we do the hybrid meetings, we'll be coming. I'll be doing a lot of those myself because we'll be bringing a camera with it. But my main role is to support the TPSU lecturers. So if you have any problems, issues, you have opportunities, certainly if you have any compliance issues, I'm here to support you. But on a day-to-day, like creating the meeting and going through all the things, I've intentionally not had a role and delegated that. But I do want you all, and no matter what, to give me a call or send me a note if you have an issue or problem. But on a day-to-day, the staff will take care of you. So Steph is the executive director, and he oversees pretty much everything, but his real focus is on the content, your presentation, the panelists, the keynote. And not only is it to make sure that we have the appropriate content, but also to make sure that we can get continuing education approval. Diane, like me, is a support. She doesn't have a day-to-day role, but she does logistics support when we need to. Providers sometimes call her, and you can also call her if you can't reach me. Isabella is logistics. She's the program director. Everything to with putting on the program, continuing education, all the contracts and logistics are with Isabella. Elizabeth Youngs is finance. So as you're looking to fund your program and pay, Dan Hall is advisor sales. Mark Lester, who is on the call, he is our liaison to associations, and we have relationships with over 300 associations, and it's a very significant way of marketing and recruiting. DJ does all our tech, and RJ Larney is our charger of the recruiters, all of the callers, and telephone recruiters report to RJ, but he oversees the whole recruiting effort, whether it's social media, email, and is coordinating with Mark and others on that association. So those are the key people. You'll be dealing mostly with Steph, Isabella, and Elizabeth when it comes to finance. So if we could go to the next slide, Steph. This is just a bit of a snapshot, which changes literally from day to day in terms of where the zones are. And just to give you a sense, the available zones are in yellow, the blue are licensed zones that we have, and some of them we do need to update. With the virtual, we are willing to do programs in areas where, and I notice here we do have San Diego's open, but it is with Mike Roberts, so that's an error. But we are willing and able to do programs, let's say in Albuquerque, where we probably wouldn't do an in-person program, but we'd be willing to do a virtual because we have a greater area to recruit from. So we'll be adjusting this as we look at the virtual. But we are open to that. And there's this list and this map is on our website under the trial website under About, and it's under TPSU. So you can see this, and you can actually see the zones and the area codes and what's open. I think we have about 75 zones, and there's about 30 that have been licensed. And we can talk about licensing and costs and exclusivity because it's changing a little bit with the virtual nature of things. But it's a limited group, and we are looking for lecturers, but we're also very, very careful with the people that we pick, not only because of the experience and our brand, but also, you know, we want to make sure that you can handle this because it is a big responsibility to us. And when we do the finances, we will talk about the finance and licensing, but you know, we're completely open to whether you want to do virtual or hybrid or just in person. When we do in person, we are going to pretty much exclusively go to hybrid, meaning we're going to allow people to dial in remotely, virtually for the first 3 hours of the program on that. But if you do at least, you know, if you do one in person and 2 virtuals or 3 virtuals, certainly if you do 2 hybrids, you can have exclusivity. If you did 1 virtual, 1 hybrid, you can do the program, but we're going to reserve the right to have another advisor do the program there. So we're really looking at, as I said, a combination of either 3 virtuals, 2 virtuals and a hybrid, and we'll go over that in the financing on that. But when we get into the stats, which hopefully, Steph, can you do, just to give you a sense of our trending here is on the first column, you have the number of registrations, which is different than, and then and those are by companies. And then we have the how many companies actually attended. Actually, those are people. I'm sorry, the average attendees. The second column is the number of people that attended. And then the TPSU invited is the number of that we've done. So the total number of companies is the final one. So in 2020, we had an average of 25.1 companies, 29.2 attendees, which is up significantly from 2019, which was 20. We were starting, usually we start the year off pretty good, and we did, I think, 12 programs before we were forced to shut down. And so I think it wasn't just because of the hybrid, but the virtual, but it did help. But our trending line is going up significantly. You know, we started with 8.9. In 2018, we were 17.8. So we've had a very, very significant increase. And part of it is because there's yeah, thank you, Steph. There's a increased demand for education and training. There's an awakening. Plan sponsors are waking up to their responsibilities. It's a concern about fiduciary, but also how do I run this plan? And finally, you know, how do I help my participants? How do I help my employees? So we're seeing really, really good demand. I think we're getting better. And certainly I would say there's 3 types of zones. There are ones where we open them up and we just have incredible response. And like a Charlotte and Atlanta, we always have, from the beginning, we had a great response in terms of attendance and registration. There are others that we have difficulties to begin with. The second is we have difficulties to begin with, but then over time with brand and people coming and the word of mouth, it gets better. Denver was a very tough zone for us, and now it's one of our best zones out there. And then there are zones that continue to be difficult and challenging for us. And just so you know, the more difficult the zone is, the more time, the more hours, the more resources that we spend to get that. You know, in a zone like Atlanta, we pretty much open it up and we get 20, 30 registrations, and we're able to really fill the room without a lot of effort. And then there are other zones, I think Milwaukee is always a challenging zone for us. And we've been doing programs there for a while. We spend a lot of time doing that. So those are just some of the trend lines that we're seeing. Steph, if we can go to the next slide. And so this just shows you sort of our process. So 43 programs, was it 12, DJ, that we had in person? So it's only 30, we did 31 virtual, I'm pretty sure that's true. We had 70, I'm sorry?
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, so we had 70 in 2019, 64, we pretty much were in the 60s from 15 to 18. We were very limited, or we were careful about, expanding too quickly because we wanted to make sure that we could catch up with the recruiting. Total number of attendees is pretty amazing, 9,736 companies. In terms of who showed, we were in the 60s, low 60% range. That's the column that shows percent showed. Lower in 2020, but I think that was a function of just the virtual of it. And then the next column, the one, not the last one, but the next to last one, is the percent that show that getting rid of those that we call 3 to 5 days before each program to reconfirm. And if they say, no, I can't come, we'll take that out. So that's why that's more of an 80% when you take out the people that originally registered, but then on the phone told us that they cannot attend. And so then overall, it was about a 50% this year, but in previous years, and this will probably be more normal, it's about 55%. And you might say, well, we're missing an opportunity because, why are 45% not showing? If you're too high, it means that we're being too picky in terms of the registration, and we'll probably have a higher show rate, but in the end, the number will be lower. So the 55 to 60% is a pretty good rate. We'll see with the virtual whether we're happy with 50 or whether that will go up at all. But that just gives you a sense of where we're at in terms of totals as well as the show rate overall. And if we could go to the next slide, Steph, to give you a profile of the companies that are coming. So our sweet spot and where we focus is that 3 to 100 million. And that is pretty much 2/3 consistently across the board. Is interesting. We had a higher percentage of that 10 to 100 in 2020, maybe larger companies coming with the virtual, and then the 3 to 10, and then the 10% over 100 million, and 15% or so on an average in that 1 to 3. We're not really focused on that 1 to 3. We're not really focused over 250. You can tell us and direct us what you're interested in. If you say, no, I want that 1 to 3, or, we can't really guarantee, exclusively over 10, but yeah, I am focused more on the 10 to 100s. We can start there, or even, larger plans. But generally, I think where we go is that 3 to 100, and that seems to be a good sweet spot for us. If you look and you see average assets, it's 130 million. But that's deceiving because when you look at the median assets, it's about 10. And we've been consistently in that 8 to 10 million, which is more indicative of that. And I think if you look at participants, it's close to 200 is the median. It's close to 2,000 on the average. We're getting some larger plans, And we expect to have larger plans because we are partnering with a new plan sponsor association that really is starting with some of the very, very largest companies that we're going to help recruit to go as members. But as a result, we will have some larger plans, which may or may not be, helpful to you. You know, if you get a $5 billion plan, it might look good. It's good credibility, but chances are you're not going to be able to become the advisor for that. So I'm going to turn this now over to you, Steph and Isabella. I don't think I have anything else in terms of the slides.
Okay, great. Thank you, Fred. In going to this segment, we're going to talk about very specifically how one prepares for a virtual TPSU program. It's a bit different than what we do on the in-person, obviously. The logistics that we're talking about, what we do with speakers, and then any updates that we have along this line. So Dr. Isabella Wagner is, I guess, in probably close to the 7th or 8th year of doing this, and she oversees the entire program. So when it happens and it goes off without a hitch, it's because of Isabella and DJ primarily, and their hard work in getting things ready on the front end. So what I'd like to do is just go through as an overview how the program functions, how it works, and also we'll review a sample agenda. We'll go through that rather quickly here as soon as I'm done with this slide. And then what you can expect on the morning of the program. But even more important than that is all of the legwork that starts at TPSU 70 days in advance of your program. So we'll go through all of those, and I'm going to ask Isabella from an overview standpoint. Isabella, do you have anything else that you would like to cover right before we get into the specifics of this?
No, I think the agenda is first the most important thing everybody wants to know. What are the time slots and who do I have to recruit to be on my TPSU program? And then we go through the preparation, what we expect from the lecturers team and what the lecturers team can expect from the TPSU team.
Good. And we've tried to keep it in a logical order, but we do have some moving components behind the scenes that everybody doesn't see, and some you're also involved in. So it might seem like we're bouncing around a bit, but we want you to see exactly what we're doing and how we pull it off, and give you a good idea of why we ask you to do what we do ask you to do and the timelines around that. So starting, we would have an introduction for approximately.
Hey, Steph, can I just?
Sure.
I want to emphasize that getting us that agenda as quickly as possible and as far ahead of time as possible is really, really important for recruiting purposes, because if people know what's going to be discussed versus our just draft agenda, it helps us recruiting. And remember, if you have someone that as a keynote, or you're not 100% sure about what you want to discuss and you want to change it later on, you can do that. So this is not set in stone, but the earlier we get, you can't give us the agenda too early, because then Isabella will put it up and we can recruit to the issues on that.
And Isabella, would you want to add on that as well?
No, I think it's really important to emphasize what Fred says. As soon as you know your keynote speaker, even if it's only the name and the company, and you know your panelists, I can create the agenda and post it on the TPSU website at your program page. And as Fred said, it is really important for recruiting, because there are many programs out there, and we have many programs on that website, and it's important to know what they can expect.
Good. And for those who are repeating, it should be very easy to put it up on the second program. You'll know what the drill is, and you'll know what you have to put in place. Isabella is very adroit at changing the speakers if need be. But what we'd like to see is have the adjunct lecturer in the area who gets their name up and out as quickly as possible. So don't hold a lot up. I mean, if you only have 2 of your panelists, don't hold your agenda up for that. They can always be added at a later date. So going through the agenda, and it's not a lot different than what we did in an in-person environment. The difference would be we have 4 sessions instead of 5 sessions, and we have a little bit shorter in each of the sessions. And, you know, one of the things we're dealing with is the entire fact that we're doing this virtually, and it's not as easy to hold people as long as it once was in person. So because we are going virtual, we've trimmed it back. We'll get into the CE that's being delivered and available for this, but but this agenda has been working for us. So we have the introduction, which will be by either Fred or me, and then the adjunct lecturer will go next, introducing their portion of the program. We have a short break. We have a 10-minute break, and then we'll introduce the adjunct lecturer. We'll then introduce the keynote speaker and their presentation. After that, we go to the panel. We will have 3 or 4 people on the panel normally. And the nice thing is we don't have to move any chairs, and we don't have to move anything around in the room. It's always kind of unnatural for those of us that do this in the physical environment to go to that panel right away, but it's much more doable in a virtual environment. So then we have another 10-minute break. At that point, then the ideal plan, either the adjunct lecturer or Fred or I will work through that. If Fred or I do it, we usually invoke the adjunct lecturer to work through some of the pieces with us, and then the closing. And I don't think we've had any programs that have gone beyond 12 o'clock. So people appreciate that, just as they did when we were conducting the other programs. We always get people out on time, and so far in this environment, we have not gone over at all. So, but there's a lot of pieces that that are behind the scenes on this that you don't really see.
Okay, thanks, Steph.
Okay.
If there are not any more questions, we're going on to this continuous education credits. That's our next point, and it's really a very important issue. So can we go to the next slide, Steph, please?
Yes.
So we are approved, and this is the virtual platform, and it was not so easy to get approved for all of our 4 associations. We are approved with American Payroll Association. We are approved for CPE credits, which is mainly required for CPAs. We are approved with HRCI and SHRM. And for the virtual platform, the program itself is 3.5 hours. With the breaks, we are approved for 3 hours of continuous education credit. The in-person program is a 6-hour program, and we have 5 hours of CE credits. So we are thinking about how can we offer 2 additional CE credits, especially for SHRM and HRCI. And we got approved for 2 online courses, which can the plan sponsor attendee, after they attended the TPSU program, they can access our learning management system, and they can take 2 courses and get 2 additional CE credits with SHRM and HRCI. This is just good for once a year, since it's the same course for the entire year. SHRM is the only association which is or grants us to have 3 hours of CE credits for each TPSU program the plan sponsor attends in that year, for every single one. If they attend 5 TPSU programs, they get 5 times 3 CE credits with SHRM, but that's really an exception. All the others, American Payroll Association, CPE, and HRCI, they grant us our program for once per year.
It's kind of interesting that that SHRM will give it to us, and that SHRM recognizes that each of these programs that we're putting on, even if there's two in the same city in 1 year, that the content is going to be different in each one. The others, I don't think they're really digging into our content as much, and they figure, oh, okay, it's a TPSU program, it's exactly the same. And our point is that even if we tried to conduct a TPSU program exactly like the last one, we couldn't do it. So it's SHRM's great to work with on that, and we greatly appreciate that. And then the two additional online courses, it's a big selling point for us when we can, when we're talking about getting people to your program, and that they can come and spend the 3 hours and get another 2, so the 5 hours of CE is very attractive.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So this is mostly about CE credits. So there is one very important requirement. American Payroll Association and the National Registry for CPE sponsors, their requirement is that the attendee has their certificate of completion within 48 hours. And we make sure that they really receive that certificate within 48 hours. We don't want to jeopardize our own program being audited or having problems for the next year to be approved. So this is really important with American Payroll Association and the CPE credits.
Good. And then we also have access to the learning management system where they can get their, they can get and earn a designation from the plan sponsor university. They can receive the certified 401k the certified plan fiduciary designation, a designation conferred by TPSU, and that has a total of 12 courses, of which TC 100 and TC 125. If they take those courses for additional CE, they've got 2 of those courses knocked out and they're on their way. We don't require that they get the designation, but we do want the attendees to understand that we do have additional education available to them. That's at no additional cost, provided they work through those courses in the first 6 months. So we want people to receive the education. We also have a online survey that we conduct at the conclusion. We used to have a form we would have people fill out, but in the virtual environment, that's not as doable as it once was. So we do have the surveys that we send, and we obviously collect information on what they want to work on in their plan, et cetera. For adjunct lectures, that information is available to you, and that will be sent to you. So with that, unless you have anything else, Isabella, in the interest of time, we need to move on to our postcard. Does that work?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I'll speak a little to this, and then Isabella, you can get into the specifics. But this is what we're doing: is creating an electronic postcard now. A lot of people don't like receiving mail. They're not even going into the office to get mail. So the U.S. mail is not as functional for us as it once was, but we do provide these electronic postcards that we use in our efforts to get people to your program, and we suggest that you use them as well. So Isabella can tell you a little bit about putting that together and what the timelines are on that.
Usually we create this postcard 4 weeks before the TPSU program. We get it done and then send it to the lecturer, because this is your document, your material you can send out to your clients. When you contact them by email, this is a PDF attachment, and I think it's working very well. It has most of the important information about the TPSU program, how it works, a little bit about the plan sponsor university. It doesn't go very specifically into the lecturer. The lecturer's name is definitely there, and that you have a CKP designation, or if you're enrolled in the CKP designation, that is the important information we give out. But in general, this is a TPSU program, and it's branded by TPSU. So we have also comments on the second page here. When you look at the slide on the left side, these are pretty new comments from last year. Actually, all of them have attended our virtual programs. Some had already attended an in-person program before. And I can tell you, our virtual program was really well received. I read all the online surveys and we do a summary for the lecture. The main consequence of being virtual is very well received, because people know this is a very good platform and it's easy to attend. They can do it out from their office. It's only 3.5 hours. So it's a really very good alternative.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you,
And
Steph.
don't be bashful about calling or emailing Isabella. She's always happy to help. It's a lot easier and more beneficial for us to address your questions as soon as they pop up, instead of waiting till they might become a problem for you. So please feel free to use us as a resource.
I think the most important thing is to talk about, what are the best strategies and who you should be approaching on the program to get funding for your program, if in fact that's the way that you want to do it on it. So, but before we do that, let's go into some of the specifics about the cost and the schedule and everything. So coming for 2021, if we can go to the next slide, Steph. And I did introduce Elizabeth Youngs. She is your main contact on finance. We maintain a P&L statement for every single program on Google Docs, which you should have access to. If you don't, have Liz. Liz will contact Liz and she will get that for you. And what that does, it lists all your costs by program. And then any amounts of money that you might have paid, and then any amount that has been billed to a provider, and then actually what amounts have been paid by that provider on that. So that is a sheet that you can look at. If for some reason you can't access Google Docs and you want Liz to send it, she can download that spreadsheet, but that's very, very helpful to you. She's also will be sending out, as we revise agreements, I think every year we have some revisions, she'll be sending those agreements out. So please contact her directly, just to get a sense from a compliance point of view, but also just the way we're doing it. This is a TPSU program. You are participating in the program. You are responsible for the finances in anything that is not funded by a provider. But for our purposes, for the client's purposes, for the compliance, this is a TPSU program. You should position it as if you were speaking at a local SHRM or CPA meeting. Those meetings, some of them do require some marketing funding. The marketing funding is obviously a little bit different, and there's no other advisor that's allowed to come to the program. But that's the way that we look at it, and it's the way that we recommend. We had in the past, for some of you who have been for a while, had a licensing fee, which gave you the exclusivity, and then a program fee. And to simplify things, we've just gone directly to the program fees. So in 2021, the virtual programs will be $12,500. And realistically, I mean, we had been hoping with the vaccine that we were able to do, we'll be able to do in-person programs late June. That's not looking terribly good now, unless the vaccination kicks up, and it looks like it is starting to. If not, we're looking probably after Labor Day. And you always have the option to do virtual. So in terms of, I couldn't see the chat from John Gentry. I know it came up, but I'm having trouble seeing chat. What would DJ? What was that comment from John? If it was private, don't say it.
No, I just said I know you're an aspirational guy, but you need to remove that extra zero from your exclusivity pricing.
Yeah, it's 37.5. Yes, it's 37,500, not 370. Yes, thank you for that. So anyway, the program fees are 12,500 for the virtual. In person is 20,000, but I think that we'll be really going, when we're able to do in person, go to the hybrid. So the hybrid is a combination of in person and virtual, and the additional costs are, we have to send someone and the equipment in order to be broadcasting. What we'll be doing is broadcasting live. The program, we have to coordinate, that means that some of your speakers and panelists can attend virtually as well, but we have to coordinate all of that. If you are, at the end of the year, if you want to reserve the zone for the next year, it's a $3,500 per zone by November 1st, 2021. So that's not coming up for a while. It doesn't mean that if you don't give us the zone, you can't have it. What it does mean, though, if someone else comes in and is willing to pay for it and put the deposit down, they have that ability by putting the deposit down or getting funding, or if you've got additional funding from this year you want to use towards it, it means you have locked it down. In terms of the program fee, we'll start invoicing for the program 120 days before. We want a $3,500 deposit 90 days before, then $7,500. 60. I might have those dates wrong. Do I have those dates wrong? The $7,500 due 90 days. Is that correct? That's for the in-person or the hybrid. So, right, 3,500 is for the virtual, 7,500 if we do the in-person or the hybrid. And then the balance on whatever is due is due 60 days, because that's when we send our marketing, do our marketing, heavy duty recruiting. And if we don't have that money either pledged, and if we've got a pledge from a provider, we consider that to be money in the bank. We don't have to get paid in order for it. We don't have to, some providers won't pay until after the program. That's fine. We consider the money to us once they've pledged it, because only in the rarest of rare occasions have we had a provider not pay. Usually that's when we've got a turnover for the wholesaler, but even that, we usually get paid on that. So if we don't have a full commitment or funding for 60 days, we can know we will not do the program. And in the 70-day call, that's something that you really want to go over with Liz in terms of funding. If you are having problems and you do need help, just let me know and we will try to figure something out. But absent that, we cannot go forward. In terms of the ability to do exclusivity, and that used to be part of the zone. Before the virtual, it was 2 programs a zone per year. And our year starts March 1st, because by the end of the year, as you're evaluating whether you want to do it or not and put your deposit down, by the time you decide, we need at least 90 days for existing lecturers and 120 for new ones to get the program up to date. So if you decide on December 1st or something, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it, we've lost January and December. So we start our, programs in March 1st for the, the calendar year. So programs for this year that go into January and February are considered part of this year's contract, and you can use those dates for this year's contract and funding. So in terms of exclusivity, it had been 2 programs in person, a little different now. So at least 3 virtual programs. So that's that's where we come up with the 37.5. If you did 2 virtuals and 1 hybrid, that would do it. If you did 2 hybrids, obviously, that would do it. So if you want to make sure that no one else is doing a program in your area, we're going to need a minimum commitment of 37.5 on that, and whatever combination we get there. And you might say, you know, let me try it. Let me try the virtual. Let's see how things are going. That's fine. We will, you know, but we can't hold, for example, you say, hey, I want to do 1 virtual, and then we have somebody else who's already ready, willing, and able to commit to other programs. We can't hold that zone open for 12,500 in terms of virtual. As soon as you get the list of sponsors, send it to us, but at least 90 days before the program. You really have to be recruiting. It's, you know, ABC, always be closing. I would say ABR, always be recruiting for sponsors. Always be looking, as the wholesalers call you up, what can we do? How can we support you? This is, you know, you should always be mentioning this. And obviously, all we need to know is from you is which provider is willing to commit, the name of the wholesaler, and then how much they're looking for, willing to support, and then we take it from there. And whichever way you want to communicate that with us, just let us know. But you don't have to be involved at all with the invoicing or the follow-up. If we're having trouble getting paid, we may invoke you, but usually we're pretty good. So Liz, anything you want to add there? And I want to get into a little bit more on the strategy and best practices. And we're going to have a full panel on this tomorrow from adjunct lecturers on how they get funded. On that, we're, you know, the ones who have been doing it very successfully. But Liz, anything you want to add here?
What you've covered everything pretty good. I do spend a lot of time sending out emails to the sponsors. Usually they pay within the 2nd or 3rd email. If I don't get, like you said, if I don't get a hold of them, get a response, I do email the adjunct lecturer so they know. In fact, on the break, I just sent one to John Negret so he can look at that and get back with me on that, because I'm missing an email for one of his sponsors that's not getting a response from. So my suggestions to everybody is the sooner you get sponsors to me, the sooner we get the ball rolling at collecting the money for these programs for you guys.
Thanks, Liz. And Steph, we can take it off sharing screen now. So people always ask me, who are our biggest sponsors? Who are the best providers? And the answer is, it depends on you. There's no provider out there, including Vanguard, who I will say that almost every provider, I can't think of anyone who says, no, I do not fund TPSU. We used to have a couple of providers that would only pay the venue, and I think we're actually down to just one. JP Morgan will only pay for the venue. Now that's a non-issue, because for virtual, there are no vendor expenses. But when we're doing in person, they generally run about $1,500. American Funds had been that, and they went from that to being one of our, if not our largest sponsor, and they like keynotes. I think Invesco had an issue as well. And now when they merged with Oppenheimer, who didn't, we haven't seen that. So everyone is sponsoring this. They get it. They like it. The fact that it's educational, they get to present and be part of it. They see the value and the quality. They want to support you. remember, they have plenty of money in the sense that their revenue is based on the market, and their costs have gone down significantly because they're not traveling, they're not going to events. So they have a lot more there. So I think this has probably been one of our easier years in terms of recruiting, because we don't have as much competition on that. So the reality is, in terms of who, it's, we could have, like, for example, T. Rowe is a very, very good supporter, but if you don't have a lot of business with T. Rowe, and you don't do a lot of business and don't use them, that's not going to help you. The fact that they're supporting a lot of TPSU programs doesn't mean anything, because it's a global, obviously we have to get national approval, and I work on that. And it's really more of making sure they're aware of what we're doing. In some cases, getting funding. But then even if they're funding it at a national level, they still let the local wholesalers determine who they want to fund and how much they want to fund for the program. So what I would look at is the DCIOs, the record keepers, and then I'll have the other category, and I'll talk about the other. The DCIOs is really more about your current book and the flow and new money that they're getting. You have to put yourself in the position of the wholesaler, and that wholesaler, depending, how are they getting paid? So for DCIOs, I think probably the most common is net new flow. So if you're giving them new books of businesses or new assets, or you're flowing assets with current plans, some are just new, not net new, but just new. So you have to understand how they're getting paid, and then based on that, are you a good client of theirs, and are they willing to support you? For record keepers, it's not your current book. You could have a large book with John Hancock, for example, but you haven't sold a plan with them in 5 years. That does nothing for that wholesaler. That wholesaler is based on how many new plans am I getting. So you have to look at that. So both with record keepers and with DCIOs, there could be new ones coming in, or ones that are not doing business with you, but are looking to do business with you. And they're willing to support you. I know that State Street, who entered into the retail advisor sold DCL market 3 or 4 years ago, they were willing to support people that maybe hadn't been using the State Street, but they felt like they could. And that's the other caveat. We strongly recommend, and I'm not going to tell you how you should do your business, but it's going to be a little awkward if you take money from someone and you are not able to support them. As a record keeper who's really, really aggressive with you and willing to give you money, but you don't really see opportunities to work with them. And same with the funds. If you say, listen, for my indexing, I only use Vanguard, or I only use BlackRock. If TIA or State Street is looking to support you and you don't really see an opportunity, it's going to be awkward over time if you're not able to support them. But that's up to you. But we strongly recommend that. It doesn't have to be just with current partners, but it can be with prospective, as long as you see that opportunity. We have seen people have TPAs, CPAs, accountants are generally the 3 other groups. We've seen some support from Wilmington Trust, which is sort of another, they're not really a DCIO, but they, have created that wrapper for DCIOs. Haven't really seen anything other than that. Steph, have you seen other types of vendors other than that?
No, not really. That's the that's the bulk of it. Every once in a while, you get an attorney or an auditing firm, but you've hit on the big ones.
Okay. So in terms of like how much you should charge, just like Yogi Berra, for us, a cash is as good as a check. We need 12,500 for the virtual, 22,500 for the hybrid. However you get there, we don't care. But with that, there are recommendations, guidelines, practices that we've seen. So, and this is more on the in-person. We've had less experience and some change with the hybrid. But for the virtual, for the in-person, we were seeing 3,500 to 5,000 for the keynote, 2,500 for the panel, and then 1,500 if they were facilitating breakouts. And I will caveat that in the saying that some people will say, listen, I got $1,000. I don't really need to speak. I just want to get mentioned. So we'll have a slide that mentions all the sponsors, and we'll talk about them in the beginning and we'll talk about them in the end. There are some that have even less. There are some that I just talked to a lecturer who, has got he's a producing TPA, and they've got a very strong relationship with the record keeper, and they just give them money and they don't even need to speak. There are some that have really, really good speakers and lecturers that you think would be good, but they don't have much funding. That's okay. We don't want to manage those relationships for you. We don't want to dictate. We want to give you as much flexibility as possible with your partners. But those are the things that we could do. If you're not sure, Liz is literally on the phone 20 times a day with wholesalers calling her, giving them credit card or funding the programs. You might say, what providers are in my area? It might be a zone that you took over from somebody else. DCIOs have larger zones than record keepers, and we're more than happy to share. But the reality is, if you don't know who the wholesaler is, you probably don't have a great relationship and a partner. And that's a big part of this, who you have been willing to meet with and to see, and you've been supporting. The larger the book of business you have, even if you're as a provider who you're not doing business with, if they see $1 billion, they might be willing to take a shot and see if they can earn your business. We generally are, I think in the past looking for at least 250 million. It's not a hard line, but it's just more if you're looking to get support and you don't have at least 250 million, you're probably looking at a shortfall, which is fine if you're looking for 100% funding. I think if you're looking for 100% funding, what I've seen, if you don't have at least $500 million, you're probably not going to get 100% funding, and you have to be willing to subsidize and pay a certain percentage of that. So those are some of the things. And then the one last thing I will tell you, and we'll talk about this again tomorrow, is the things we've seen successful is doing it early. If you've got a couple of programs coming up, getting it funded in the beginning of the year or even at the end of the previous year, and let them know as your providers are budgeting. Sometimes also at the end of the year, they have money and they have money in their budget and they want to use it. We'll take that money, we'll put it in the bank for you, and it's a credit for the next year. But I would be planning at the end of the year for the next year, look at all the programs and not position it like, hey, I really need your help. I want help. I need funding. Is more, I have a limited opportunity. I've only got one keynote per program. I've only got 3 or 4 panelist slots. I'm really limiting the support to only my best partners is that something that you want before I go on to other partners? So positioning it as an opportunity versus asking them for favors, I think is also another best practices that we've seen. But again, we'll hear more about that on the panel on that. And before I open this to questions, Steph, anything else you want to add on this? I know you've been in the market doing this.
Not really. I think they all recognize that it is an opportunity and a benefit for them as getting in front, and they enjoy it. So it's pretty rare that they get to come into a setting and just be considered an expert without trying to sell something. So I think they enjoy it.
Yeah, we have a great reputation in the provider community, and if the wholesaler says, "Oh, my firm doesn't allow it," they're really, and again, I haven't heard of or know of any firm. In fact, I federated for a while. Federated for a while, we thought was not funding us, but generally when they say we don't fund TPSU, it means they're not willing to fund you, and they don't want to say no to you. But I haven't heard, and I had a call from Federated just on something else, and I'm like, hey, do you guys ban TPSU? And they're like, no, absolutely not. We fund TPSU. So they all do it. Somebody I'm having trouble with the chat, but I think I saw it. Payroll providers. Yeah, we have seen some payroll providers, probably not ADP. Well, ADP and Paychex, yes, but they're record keepers. But if you have a relationship with the payroll provider and you're partnering with them, that's also something I think makes a lot of sense. And a lot of the fintech record keepers like Ubiquity and Guideline and Vestwell are partnering with payroll companies. So that combination, and where those fintechs, we haven't seen the fintech, or what they don't like to be called robo record keepers. We haven't seen any of them, but they might be willing to do it with a payroll company on that. So any questions on that funding? Do we, I can't see the chat. So DJ, do we have anything coming in on the chat?
I don't have anything that's been submitted to me, no.
Okay. All right. Well, let me wrap up then, and if you do have any questions, we can address them. Is just about talk about a little bit tomorrow. Tomorrow is your peers, so we'll have some of our best lecturers. Daniel Bryant, he does 6 programs a year. Colin Clark and Joe DeNoyer, they also do 6 programs. And Todd Barden, about what they're doing on the follow-up process. When they follow up, how they follow up, how often, what are the successes they're having. Follow-up is really, really key. One of the things we're thinking about doing is do follow-up for you. I'm not opening this up yet. We're experimenting with this, and the follow-up for us would be, we would do a satisfaction survey, maybe make an offer if you're willing to benchmark their fees, and then try to make an appointment. But at this point, we've offloaded and not got involved with follow-up. I think I'm more open to doing that, but we're experimenting and seeing how that goes. So follow-up is at 11:15 tomorrow. Then we have prepping for and conducting. So from the point of view and perspective of the lecturer, what they've seen as being successful for prepping, but then also conducting. I will say that many and most of our lecturers really were just tremendous in terms of the engagement and how they did things. The best part of one of the best parts of the in-person program is we would go around the room and have every plan sponsor introduce themselves and their role and the company and why they came, and it really just broke the ice. What we can't do that on a virtual effectively. We do have a poll where we ask people the size of their company by employee, and then also what they're really looking to hear about. And I will say it's always fiduciary and wellness are the two biggest topics. And then we also have a panel with Brad Larson, Tim Doherty, and Walter Grant about funding the program. Cameron Jones and Ken McClintock are preparing. Jim Papillo are going to be the panelists there. So that's really tomorrow. And then finally, what's working, what's not working, how can we improve things? Because what I meant to say is this is not your traditional, I'm buying a service, I'm buying leads, I'm buying meetings. This we like to have as a collaborative co-op. This is your program. We're servicing you, but it's a partnership. And we want to make sure that on the one hand, we're being responsive, being good partners, listening to you, making adjustments. If we can customize it and make sense, we will. We're open to that depending on how many programs you're doing. But also, we need your help. We can't be chasing you. We can't get the presentation the day before. And if you're not willing and able to support us and do the things we need to do, then it probably doesn't make sense for us to go further in the partnership, because we try to streamline things and have a system just so you know what's going on, but also for us to keep our costs down. Because if we're having to do new systems and new processes and spending 2 or 3 times as much chasing the money, the content, that kind of thing, then it doesn't make sense for us to continue. So that's what we're going to talk about at the very end: what's working, what's not working, and really a review of next year. So before I let Steph wrap up, any final questions? Other than thank you for attending. We had really good attendance on this, so that's great. Hopefully this was valuable for you. It's really valuable for us to have this kind of training. Steph, any final words?
No, today is a broad overview of the program, and then tomorrow we'll be drilling down with individuals such as yourself, adjunct lecturers, and getting best practices from them as well. So, no, I think that wraps it up for today.
Very good. And if for those of you that are just looking and seeing, hey, I might be interested. Is my zone open? What's available? Dan Hall, Dan at TPSU. Actually, it's either one, trauniversity.com or tpsuniversity.com. Just contact him. And if you are new and are interested, I'll get on the phone with you and go through things as well and help you. But Dan is your first point of contact for interest in TPSU. So today is really like our best day, which is where we ask adjunct lecturers who have been doing this for a while to give their experiences on the different areas, following up with the plan sponsors, prepping and conducting the meeting, and then also funding the TPSU program. So you get the peer-to-peer, which for those of you who have done TPSU know the peer-to-peer is always the best part of our program. And then the final part is, what's working, what's not working, really, what are the opportunities for us to improve on TPSU? And we're going to incorporate a lot of the things that we learned from the virtual when we're actually able to go in person. And, we've been doing the in-person program since 2013 and have done, let's see how many programs we've done. We've done close to 450 programs, but only 31 have them. Only 31 programs have been done virtually. Yeah, we've done 440 programs since 2013. So, there's always room for improvement, and that's what we'll do at the end. So that's what the agenda looks like today. I just wanted to make a couple of opening remarks. 2020 for us was a very challenging year as we looked at March and where a major part of our business, especially TPSU, was meeting in person. it was pretty daunting to think about it, but we did very well. We survived. We were able to keep all the people employed. We were able to, we actually did leverage a lot of the PPP and the idle money, which really did help us quite a bit. And we ended up having a pretty good year. In 2020, and I'll go over some of the stats very quickly, we averaged 25 companies and 29 people, which was up from 20 companies in 2019 and 25 people last year. So we did, I think, 12 programs in person before we got shut down. We actually did one hybrid program in June of 2020 in Alpharetta, and the hybrid was we had cameras there, and the people we had about 25 people virtual who were sitting in for the first 3 sessions, and we had 25 people in person who were there for the entire program. It worked very, very well. The technology was there. So we had a pretty good year. We're, in terms of total number of attendees, we've had 9,000 people attend our programs, 7,336 companies. We actually had 17,000 registered. So registration is still important when someone agrees and they're getting materials. Even if they don't show up, we do follow up with them and try to re-engage with them. But we're reaching a significant portion of the market. And in 2020, even with the challenge, we had 1,255 companies, 1,000 companies attend and 1,255 people. So very, very strong programs, very, very good attendance on that. And the average assets was 130 million, although the medium was closer to 10 million. So that's really our bread and butter. And 2/3 of our attendees tend to be in that $3 to $100 million market. The 12% were over 100, and another 14% were 1 to 3 million. So that's pretty typical, not a big change there. So good year for that. Our plans for 2021 is we're going virtual until we're allowed to have meetings. I don't know when that is. I think initially when the vaccine came out and the rollout was announced, we thought, okay, we're going to have herd immunity by June. Unless things pick up pretty significantly, that doesn't look likely. Will it be September? We can pivot pretty quickly, but we'll be going virtual until we can do in-person meetings. And that may vary from area to area. There may be certain areas that have are more open than others. We probably will be some of the first meetings that ever take place, because our meetings tend to be smaller, 50 or under. And most of the people, other than a few providers here and there, are driving and local. So we're not having to have people use planes or, that kind of thing, where providers are very limited. So I think we'll be some of the first that open. And based on what we saw just in that June meeting in Alpharetta, people are so hungry to go back and have meetings and get out of the house and stop staring at their spouses and their kids and their dog and actually get out there. So we think there's going to be a good response. But until then, we're very comfortable with the virtual. We were able to get CE, 3 hours of CE for all the different groups, and 2 hours extra for online for SHRM and HRCI if they take 2 online courses. So we're up to 5, and that's CE is always critical. It's more critical than ever because people aren't able to go to meetings, and these meetings are allowed to do that. So,
Hey, Fred.
yeah.
I think also, what we're seeing is just this, COVID has sort of changed the narrative so dramatically for HR teams in terms of how they look at their employees, how they're interacting, sort of not just sort of the resiliency and empathy, but what John Mackey talked about, conscious capitalism 10 years ago. I think that is really taking hold, coupled with obviously DEI sort of initiatives. That here at Hub, we sort of, very much live and breathe that. And I think companies are as well. So they're looking at their channel partners, their suppliers, their employees, their colleagues, with whom are they working on the outside. So I think we've got collectively a good opportunity here to, obviously we're talking about the same things we're talking about, but Fred, what we've talked about is just sort of that, how they evaluate the benefit spend, how they're allocating their time, how they're viewing that relationship with the employer employee so differently. And we've been talking about it for years, but I mean, it's changed so dramatically. So in the conversations I have, as all day, every day with companies and prospects, those are the things they want to talk about. They want to talk about a little, total rewards, or it's going at it a little different angle. So I think scaling or adding on sort of what we do in our programs, guys, is sort of an HR component or a benefits component. We've been doing that for years, and it adds a little bit of a 360-degree view for the audience and for the attendees. So I don't know, Fred, if your thoughts on that, but I'm telling you, it makes a big difference.
I think that what we're seeing in the entire market is convergence, the convergence of wealth, retirement, and health and benefits at the workplace. And we're seeing that workplace as the great way to help people, and plan sponsors are very, very interested in that. So we're actually thinking about experimenting a little bit for those of you, especially affiliated with a benefits firm, to add a second panel where it's led and always on benefits. Not only do you allow your partners to be involved, but you can get a whole new group of providers that are willing to come and support.
Yeah, we do. So I'm doing Nashville, I know, in like 3 weeks or something, our first of the year, and I do 6 a year. But we always have a benefits person on that panel, right. And it adds a different sort of feeling and vibe and perspective, and it's always been really good. So
cool.
My 2 cents.
So yeah, some of the things that we can change and adapt, we can talk about at the end of it, but we are very excited about the opportunities with hybrid, where we allow people to come in person and virtual, and it expands your territories. It expands where we can recruit from. So people that 2 or 3 hours away that we really wouldn't be trying to recruit, that aren't going to drive, they could do virtual and even national marketing on that. So we think there's a lot of opportunities. There are also challenges in the sense of how do you engage people? It's much harder to engage when you're doing virtual than it is in person. Our programs in person are so engaging, and we really have tremendous interaction throughout the program. We have a little bit of it, but not as much as we would like. And we're trying to figure out ways to improve that engagement. People, I think, are also becoming more comfortable being online and attending these meetings and doing it. We would like to move, and we can talk about this at the end. Normally our programs, our virtual programs, are Zoom webinar, where you have only the panelists or the speaker camera on. In Zoom meeting, which is this format, it engenders more interaction. We had about 100 people do the virtual CKP with UCLA professors, and they're just like ninjas on this. They had people engaged and talking. I mean, it was like really incredible program. So the problem that we're facing is with CE partners, they're requiring the attendance. So we got to make sure that people are actually on all the time, which you can't do as well doing the Zoom meeting as you can with the Zoom webinar. So in any case, we're looking at all of that. So we have our first panel is coming up, and I don't want to give them short shrift. We only have a half hour. And here we're talking about the best practices in following up with plan sponsors. One of the things we are potentially looking at, we're just experimenting it, is actually having TPSU do follow up. I know that other programs do that, and we're starting to get more comfortable. And we're going to do a couple of pilots there and see how it works. And we'll come back to everybody for those who are interested. But to this point and going forward, the follow-up is really, really critical. It's important to provide education, but if you're not following up and trying to leverage that, it becomes harder and harder to justify. So on our panel today, we have 4 of our most experienced lecturers. Daniel Bryant, and Daniel is the founder of Sheridan Road and is now part of Hub, and he's president national sales for Wealth in Retirement. Do I have that title right, Daniel?
Directionally close, Fred.
Directionally close, but he does 6 programs for us, 2 in Chicago. He's got the downtown area, Nashville and Denver, and they're all fantastic zones on that. Colin Clark and Joe Denoyer are also with Hub. And there was a big announcement with Joe this week, but I'll let him do that. I don't want to steal his thunder. And they do 6 programs as well in the Washington, D.C. area. So they have the whole beltway north of D.C., and then Northern Virginia. And both Daniel and Colin and Joe have been doing programs from the beginning. And then Todd Barden, who is in the Milwaukee area and has done a fantastic job on follow-up, and we'd love to hear his perspective. So some of the things that we want our group to talk about, and we do want interaction. So anytime you want to interrupt, there's no PowerPoint, there's no set, is, what they're doing, the practices that work when following up, when they follow up, what their process is, how they're deploying staff and the collateral they're using, what's going on, what's the ongoing, because, there's a drip process and you don't just close on the first call or meeting. And then, what doesn't work, what are the things that really don't work, and just share some of their successes. So with all of that, I'll just open up to our panel, and whoever wants to start on whatever of those subjects would be great.
Hey, so Fred, I'll jump in and start real quick by saying that,
I just want to.
Who's speaking?
Go ahead, Joe.
We've been doing this so long. I don't know how long, Fred, that we've been doing TPSU. I think we were one of the first ones, but
you were.
There were many mistakes along the way, and I can tell you and it's getting better and better from all of us, right? And I would say the most important thing is really following a process for follow-up, and it took us a long time to get there. Like we tried many different things, and over time, Colin, who runs our TPSU effort within our office, we would share with our whole team, like, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And over time, we came up with a process that is what we feel is most suitable for the folks that we're trying to attract and the folks that attend. But before we talk about all the things we do and that everybody in the panel does, I would say, as a mind share, as the study group and just as a mind share, if there's something that you find works particularly well or speeds up the process, I think you all know that we share everything we do at TPSU. I mean, we're kind of an open book, but a lot of these ideas came from one-off conversations with each other. And somebody said, I tried this or I tried that. And what we found over time is once we made it a true process and we stick to it and everybody on our team's engaged in it, it shortened the timeline on to not to sell 401k plans, but to identify the real prospects that are real opportunities within the next 6 months versus ones that are going to be in the pipeline. They're real opportunities, but we're going to have to wait a little while, versus the outliers. And surprisingly, the outliers come back. So we never write them off. We're still in sales. So once we have your name, you're kind of screwed. But overall, what we found is we made a sale last year that they went to TPSU in 2016. I
Yep.
mean, you're like, what? But overall, that whole cycle, this is a great opportunity, we feel, to keep the brand awareness in front of them. And most importantly, is to become a resource, and eventually a resource that's top of mind when they're thinking about 401k stuff. So I don't know if you want us to each of us go through our process or how we want to handle this, but I just wanted to jump in because I know, I've picked Daniel's brain before, and Todd and I talked way back on follow-up. And I just know that the more you make it a process, the easier it is for your office to manage, whether you're a 2-person shop or 50-person or 500, once you start following that process. Because you think about it, the attendees' experience before they get to is Fred and his crew are following a process to get them there. So they've been down a path that they've been guided to the whole time until they're actually an attendee. And then as advisors, we kind of forget about a process and just kind of throw things against the wall. So I find that it makes it better to continue down that same path at the process that TPSU already set up for us. And that's the key point there, I think.
I totally agree.
But I'll let, Colin, I'll let you kind of talk more about some of the things we do, or, does anybody else have any comments? Because I don't want to just give you the prescription. I don't think there's really a prescription here.
Okay, I was just going to say, I totally agree. You have to have a process. So I've done, 43 programs. So I've done a lot of these. And we've got, I think, 580 companies that are still in our pipeline from TPSU, right? So talking about 600 companies, just like Joe said, they never get off the list, right? Once you're in the boat, we don't let go of you. So, but we do feel that, once they've had that great experience at TPSU, we're very efficient. We hit them, very quickly afterwards. So, we'll send them the materials literally like the next day. I'll follow up with an email like 3 days later. We parse out the names to a group of people who also attended TPSU. So we'll have a team of us that'll be there, and we will assign who's specifically going to be following up with this particular group of companies, depending on where they sat. So we usually have people sit at the different tables and breakout sessions, so they develop a little bit of a repertoire, a little bit of a dialogue with them. And so we have those specific people follow up with calls, right? So I send them an email with all the material. I've got this little fiduciary handbook that I send out, all of Fred's materials. That goes out literally like the next day. And Fred knows if I don't have like the list of attendees by that night or the next morning, we're calling them, because I really feel like speed is of the essence. They had a good experience. Like Joe said, they're in a process. You want to continue that conversation. And we've actually won plans going back to 2013, 2014. We won something, this is about a $250,000 revenue win for Hub. And Fred's heard me talk about this. They attended a program in 2017, kept coming back. We won the benefits, we won the retirement. We're going to get an executive comp sort of piece. So that alone is going to be, a $350,000 win. So when I look at sort of the ROI on, TPSU, I just have to point to a couple of those wins and realize that, the return is gigantic. We definitely have some that are lower hanging fruit, in the 30, 60, 90 day sort of outline. They'll say, record keeper, whatever. They'll tell us like where the problems are. And that's when we're really jumping in. We're very targeted in our email back to them saying, look, you said this, we're going to follow up on that. And so we, again, powwow the next day with our internal team. We divide the list, and they literally have to call, within 24 hours. So from there, we just have a dialogue. And as we know, it might take years to ultimately, when they need our help or services, but we just want to be there for them. We don't want them to think that they can't call us for advice or anything. Some people will call and say, hey, you talked about consolidation within the record keeper space. Can we talk about that? Totally. You talked about executive benefits a little bit. What do we need to do there? So we have all these one pagers we'll sort of prepare them with. And so I think process, speed is important. And then I think what Joe said is like, they never get off your list. Don't remove them just because they're not actionable within 6 or 9 months. We know this is a 24-month sales cycle, even if they may want to do something. So have a patience, play the long game, and know that, don't be disappointed or, bummed out if things don't turn as quickly as you want. I think our guys are they've come to appreciate that, but in the beginning they're like, this isn't going anywhere. I'm like, you got to play the long game here. I mean, we have a good relationship with them. They like us. They learned a ton. They love the program. Let's just keep dripping on them.
And Todd, what are some of the things that have been effective for you on the follow-up? Because I know you have a pretty good process as well. Yeah, and you got to go off on mute. You're on mute, Todd.
And unfortunately, Todd, I think you're wearing like a Packers jersey. You might need to change that. I don't know what that thing is. Was that
Daniel, can you see that number? Number 12, baby. So, anyway,
Bart Starr.
No, the MVP. Don't you know who the MVP is, Fred? Yeah.
It's Tom Brady, right?
Yeah. Touche. Very good. Very good. But I would echo what Daniel and Joe has said in regards to a lot of the follow-up. Now, the basics of follow-up, certainly email, and we do that immediately after the program the next day. The second thing that I'm doing, so I'm going to be kind of the contrarian in the room. I believe through this pandemic, everything that we used to know about marketing and communication has changed. And what I do is I do a lot more on LinkedIn. And what I've done is I've done a lot more, we're producing a lot of personal videos. So if it's a follow-up with somebody that we've identified that could be a good fit culturally for what we're trying to do, I will take the time to go into the studio and do a personal video and spend the time to do it and then send it to people. So we're going a little bit differently. I believe that we take for granted that somebody will actually listen to their voicemail in their office today. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of people that are still remote, and people will take all that information on their own time. And maybe their own time is watching a video or listening to a recorded voicemail message that's through LinkedIn as a LinkedIn First Connection. We're finding a lot of information that states that's true. But at any rate, echoing the same things, when I started TPSU, it's really, this is the farm club, right? It's the farm team. Now I've had groups and events that I've gone in and somebody has marked on their improvement opportunity form that they were going to hire somebody within 30 days. And I actually had one of those that I did get hired. So, it sometimes can be the short turnaround, but some of the larger organizations, certainly publicly traded, those take time. And those, again, we had one this year that was a 2017 attendee that took a while. So that's my experience.
Right. And I think one of the things that I've seen work with one group is they had a meeting immediately after the program with their group. So they're like, okay, what happened? Who was here? Divvying things up. And, we can do that virtually and you could do it virtually. But I think that the immediacy of that is really, really important on it. So,
hey, Fred, let me just add one thing, because I think this is a great point. So what we do in our team is we do it the next morning, but we ask each of the moderators, from our partners that sit in the breakout rooms, we ask them to, obviously they're leading the session, quote unquote, leading the session when we were doing it in person, and they're taking detailed notes. We'd ask them to send them that night. Everybody else was to do their own notes. So we put an advisor in each room as well, and they're taking notes or observing throughout the room. Like Daniel's people's are, believe me, they're planted. There's not 4 advisors sitting next to you other than the back of the room with the rest of the vendors. They're planted around the room with observation. Even if you don't have a large team and you have one other person there, they can be just observing people nodding their head, people getting involved. And then we have a team meeting, which we break it down. And like you said, Fred, we go over, compare notes. We identify who's the best opportunity based on what advisor was in the room with them or just a match if we have. And then we go on LinkedIn and scour LinkedIn to see connections. So literally right before we're even sending follow-up, we're trying to get as much intel as possible. And Colin, so Colin will lead the charge, and people run for him all these bright scopes and things before they attend. But overall, the big deal is when we're talking it through, and this is key, even if you have 2 of you on your team, you're talking it through to remind each other of the possible opportunities, so you can start customizing the communication. So, like to Todd's point, you're sending a freaking personal video. That's probably the best, and if you really think about personalization. But going through, what we're trying to do is make their experience with us, top of mind for what's important to them when it's important to them, right? So based on the questions they ask during TPSU live events, it's easy. Now, virtual, it's a little bit more difficult. So you frankly, somebody on your team has to be literally doing nothing but watching the messaging on the side. If you can get them to start, answering the polls and all that, and trying to watch their electronic reaction, because that's the signal of if there's going to be the opportunity for a relationship on a quicker basis. So again, I think that's really important, that your entire team is not there to attend to listen to the guest speaker on, possible outcomes with auto enroll. They're there to interact and watch and observe what's happening in the room or on the, online, to figure out where the best possible in is. If you're a smaller team, you could bring somebody that's not a foreign, you could bring your assistant, you can, he or she could be there, just kind of learn the role, one of your investment specialists, whatever you have available. But you can't do this. The larger team you have to spread around the room or observe on the online, I feel like the better off. Because Colin, it used to be like me, you, and one other person. And now we're inviting everybody from, we get as many people there as possible to make sure that we're not missing anything.
Well, what we're hearing references, there's something called an improvement opportunity. So we ask people to list the 3 to 5 things that they think they want to do after the meeting, benchmark their record keeper fees, do advisor RFP. I think Joe Brummel is on the call, and he takes credit for creating that. I think there's there's a disagreement on who actually did it, but what he would do is they would have a postcard and say, okay, list the 3 things you want to, do and we memorialize that and put it into a form. I'm like blanking on the guy from Michigan, Joe, who also?
Gerald.
Gerald.
And Fred, there was no disagreement on this. Let's be clear. Now, it was a joke for a few years that I turned over on Gerald for that every good idea came from Gerald at TPSU.
Right.
Because he did steal this from me. But
he's a man of my own
my
heart.
idea.
I steal everything. And then the other thing,
we know that too.
Yes. But
that was also Gerald's idea.
That's an important document. And the other thing that Joe referenced is, and this is only for the in-person, is we would ask people to take the facilitators of the breakout groups with what's working, what's not working, to take notes. And we've actually formalized that. So they have a form that they fill out and they give you at the end. So it's not even waiting for them to email it the next day. It's a form to do that. So those are some of the things. Well, let me turn it around. What are the things that you tried that really didn't work, that you thought, wow, this is going to be really great, but it really didn't bear any fruit? Because sometimes we learn more from that than our successes.
Waiting too long.
Waiting too long. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do this next week. Too late. Too late.
Totally.
We did get a question.
I think there's some gimmicky things out there too that some of the vendors kind of push, and so we're trying to stay away from those as follow-up items.
You mean like, oh, we have a report or something we can do for you?
Yeah. Like we found, to bring it back to a little bit to the success part is, we offer a fiduciary benchmark to everybody. We find that that's the most successful, but we've tried some other kind of gimmicky things. I won't name names, but they just don't like catch fire. They don't like have any, play. It's really just a systematic process of following up at immediately the 30-day, the 90-day, using the improvement opportunities.
Right.
But also it is the pregame though too. Doing the research up front. Todd mentioned the LinkedIn. The great thing about these meetings is all the mind share. And one of the great suggestions that we got a few years ago was just going in ahead of time and having that personal touch through LinkedIn and getting connected before you even show up. And we actually, that helped to increase the attendance, because it's easy for people, especially in the DC area, to not show up because of traffic. Now, obviously, we're not dealing with that virtually, but it's easy to be lazy. So the more you remind people, not only what Fred and his team are doing to get butts and seats, but what we're doing now that we have the list. And then that leads into the follow-up. And like Joe mentioned, we have the bright scopes for the groups that it makes sense. We have the fiduciary benchmarks. And then, Joe helped develop that producer dashboard for Hub, where now we can get integrated real-time data on some of these companies. And so we're really integrating that into the process as well. But that's evolved over time. And so, yeah, we kind of threw stuff at the wall and said, hey, what would work, what wouldn't work? No pun intended. But, it has been like, it has evolved over time to, but it is, I joke all the time. Joe mentioned that we got a plan from like 2016. He hates the fact that I say it's like a 3-year sales cycle with TPSU, so you have to hang in there. But you do get the one within 30 days, and then you get that one that's been 7 years. So when it all shakes out, it takes some time to break through with these folks.
Hey, Brad, it looks like you wanted to say something, or you're off.
Yeah, I was having a question. Colin was saying he used fiduciary benchmarks. Are you just talking about the branded fiduciary benchmarks piece?
Yeah, so we the two different reports, right? So we offer what we call the quick and dirty report, where you just kind of get a 482 and then crank out something to get in front of people. What we're able to do with the producer dashboard now is we're actually able to send out essentially authorizations now to get the full fiduciary benchmarks report, and we think that's going to make people take it a lot more seriously if they're giving us permission to talk to their record keeper.
Sure.
Yeah, but I would say, the real important part here is, you have to weave into your presentation. So, everybody's presentation is a little bit different. I went to Al's and I wanted to buy a 401k from Al. So, you have to weave into your presentation the kind of the teaser for a follow-up item,
sure,
without being salesy, right? So in ours, let me just tell you what we do in person, and we're having a little bit more difficulty doing it in the virtual, but we just changed and went a different road. But in the in-person, when we came back from the breakouts, we would say, hey, because we don't really talk about fees a lot in the presentation. We're talking about the human element of 401k plans. But we said, hey, one question that came up that was common in the breakouts was people, had questions about how fees are paid in a 401k plan. Now, whether that came up or not, and we would spend 7 minutes on that, Colin. We do a quick one quick conversation. We had one slide where we talk about fees and all that, which would then say, as one of your responsibilities, you have to understand if you have reasonable fees for the services provided, blah, blah, blah. And one of the benefits of being an alum of TPSU is we provide a quick snapshot or a free benchmark of your retirement plan. And just let it hang there. That was it. And just let it hang there. And that was one of the follow-up items. Virtually, what we do is now we have to, it's harder to weave that in because of the time frame. But what we want to do is we want to weave in a different angle or that angle, whatever the case may be. So for follow-up, hopefully for maybe 20% of the attendees, it clicks. Oh yeah, we talked about that. That was something I probably should be interested in. So again, following up with just a bunch of information in the slides you presented is not a hook, right? Ultimately, as you have them in your system longer and longer, like for example, what Todd was mentioning or Daniel, you start to know what's their hot button. So then you can start parsing out the right information to them. But that takes a lot of effort. In the beginning, you're kind of throwing a couple things on the wall, but we do it with purpose. So again, be a resource with purpose is kind of our motto when we're doing these things. And eventually some people are, going to get the right information at the right time when they're ready to listen to it.
And that's why I think, having sort of a broader suite of things to talk about, whether it's total rewards or financial wellness, there are going to be different things that are resonating all the time. So I always say, the 401k plan is under the umbrella of financial wellness. So when you in a meeting or one-on-one with somebody, they want to talk about it. They want to engage on it. They want to learn more. They don't know how to pay for it. What is it? And again, that's just, or how to hire or retain people. What is everybody else doing? So again, I would just sort of be nimble on the conversation that you have, that follow-up conversation that you have, because again, you don't know where it's going to go. We talk about executive comp all the time. Are you does everybody have the ability to tax efficiently save for retirement or for that version 2.0 of themselves? So I would just sort of encourage everybody to be nimble, learn maybe a few different things that maybe you haven't focused on in the past. If it's 401k, just know that they do a lot of things. And Fred highlights this in the beginning all the time. They juggle a lot of things. 401k is a tiny sliver of their day in and day out basis. So if you can connect with them on total rewards or the other things that they're doing, I think that connection will never go away. They'll be like, I can talk to that person about anything. And ultimately you can pivot to the 401k plan or executive comp or financial wellness, but that's really worked well for us.
What are you, given that it's a long sales cycle and you got to, keep in touch, what are your strategies on dripping with them? You can't do the same thing over and over, and you might have different ones for depending on what cycle they're in. So what are your dripping things that you're doing specifically to drip on these people?
I would say one thing that's been really great is as a team, we've developed a whole podcast series and the newsletters we send out. So, what Joe was saying earlier in terms of, once they're in the system, they're in the system. They're getting dripped on every week. And the great thing about the podcast and in the media, and it sounds like other folks are doing, multimedia type stuff to reach out to people, is you can track that. So we can see that people are actually listening to our podcasts about various subjects. So it's actually, that's been very effective, I would say.
Right. Todd, what's your dripping strategy look like?
Yeah. So I've been doing in the last, since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of video. So been producing a lot of video. I put some video, uploaded some things on LinkedIn this week. And so I always want to be relevant, right? So I might spend a little bit more time on LinkedIn research. I really want to know the background of the person. And again, I've been spending a lot more time on these personal videos of understanding them and maybe summarizing what we spoke about in the past and, where I think things are going in the future. But I would echo what Daniel is saying. I think the hottest thing that people want to talk about is either, and I say wellness, I don't say financial wellness, because once you say financial wellness, you back into a corner. And if you say wellness, that can engage the body and the mind, right? So it's a different experience. But I think going down that venue in trying to understand that area, when people like to read research and surveys, I think those are relevant and a good idea. But I think, I'm just personally being more about the human element right now of understanding more what that person is doing, what their company is doing, being aware of things that are going on. So that's what we're doing.
Right.
Hey Todd, can you tell us what your title is, and that'll sum it all up? What you call yourself?
Yeah. So I changed my title. So my title now is a Chief Retirement and Wellness Officer.
Drop the mic, man. Drop the mic.
I think I actually came up with Chief Retirement Officer.
No, Joe Brummel did.
That's right. That was Gerald. But I really believe that's a great title because the thing about, this is overall, is these people change. They have lots of jobs. They're not experts. If you see yourself as part of the committee, the one who's continuing, keeping all the notes, keeping the agenda, if you're the Chief Retirement Officer, not that you have to justify your fees, but what would it cost to have somebody to be focused on that? And that person they hire is not going to be nearly as experienced. So I think that's a fantastic cover. There's another one out there that being promoted called Chief Governance Officer, which I don't really like as much because it has more to do with the fiduciary and the compliance. It's about helping people to get to retirement, which means a lot of things, managing wealth, credit, benefits, and that. The one story I did want to, before we move into our next, is Joe, you told the story about a prospect who came to your program, and you were sending them all this materials that you're getting from Hub, and they said to you, you know, my current advisor doesn't even do that. You're not even an advisor. Do you want to just expound on that?
Yeah, so again, this is where you become a resource. So we were sending material very similar to what everybody's saying already, that had really nothing to do with the 401k plan. Is when COVID first started hitting, everybody was, you know, scrambling. All these businesses were scrambling with their HR policies, work from home, just you name it. There was, you know, larger companies may not have a telecommute policy, and literally they were like, we have to adopt all these different things to help keep our people engaged. And we just happened at Hub, we have a crisis management center. So they were putting out all this material, had nothing to do with the CARES Act, Secure Act. There was none of that stuff. It was how to operate your business in this environment when there is no playbook. And what it did was it was creating a playbook. Well, anyway, we were sending that out, and one of our prospects, I just tried to call them, and they actually picked up. They had their cell phone number in their email. Big mistake for them. They picked up and literally saying, hey, hoping this is not too much, but I know in this time when we're all kind of scrambling, figured some of these resources may be beneficial, but I'm really excited about, we now took it all online. So feel free to take anything you want off there and apply it in your business. And you know, she basically said, well, you know, we love our 401k advisor, but they're not advising our business. I mean, you're talking about things I need to do with my people. Lo and behold, we got an opportunity, and now they are a client of ours. Interesting enough, it happened twice. The second time it happened, we won their benefits and we won their commercial insurance, and did not win the 401k because they're just not ready to deal with it yet. But you know, put yourselves in my shoes, or anybody think about it. Now they're a client of our firm. So when the time is right to discuss the 401k plan, and it may be, you know, when they can deal with some of the other stuff, we're going to be back in to talk about the 401k plan, because they're hiring it now. They're already a client. So again, that's why it doesn't really matter what you're sending out from what material you have available, as long as it's right for them when they need it. That's the only, and sometimes that's luck, in my opinion.
Great. Well, thank you. That was a great discussion. Hopefully you guys get a lot out of it. Again, these are people who are actually doing it and experiencing it. And rather than us tell you all the things you should be doing, it's better to hear from your peers. And these are some of the most experienced people that we have, and lecturers. So thank you for that. So we're going to move into our next panel, which is prepping for and conducting the ideal TPSU program. And so on this, we're going to talk about the pre-program prep that adjunct lecturers doing, working with TPSU, working with your speakers, getting information about the registrants, your presentation, and doing that. And then tips on conducting the program. I don't want to just focus exclusively on virtual, but obviously we got to touch on it's different with virtual than in person, but both. And then ways to engage the plan sponsors, especially during this virtual format. We're using poll questions, and I know we got a question from John Gentry on that, but we work with you on the poll questions based on your presentation and your keynote. So on our panel is Jim Papillo, who is got many hats, but is it iJoin Success, or he's also an advisor, and he's in Arizona and was right from the beginning. He's conducted programs in the Phoenix area. We have Cameron Jones from NFP, who does 6 programs a year, and he does the Southern California, all the way from UCLA to UC Irvine, and we also do USC when we're in person. And we have Ken McClintock, who is a partner with Walter Grant in Aegis, and they're in the Memphis area. They actually had to twist my arm to open a zone in Memphis, and it's one of our better zones. We get really, really good attendance, not only the attendance, but the companies that come, really strong companies. So these are guys that we've seen do very, very well. And I don't know if Barbara Watling is on the phone, but she is probably, she supports Cameron, and she teaches us how to do the program. She's so good at doing, she's been doing 6 programs a year since I think 2013. So a great resource. So Cameron, let me start with you. Like, what do you do? What are the steps that you take to prepare for the program, both in person and virtual?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. And so you mentioned the first name, which is, Barbara Watlington. I can't emphasize this enough. If you have resources, internal resources to support you, it's been one of the best things ever. And I've fought tooth and nail internally. I'm a part of a larger organization, right, where Barbara has been my support person since the day I got in sales. And she's been promoted multiple times, but I've fought to keep her involved with TPSU, because once you learn the program and you kind of get a feel for it, having that consistency year over year really helps, right? This is a routine for us now. It's like almost on autopilot to an extent. But with that, the steps that we take, first we start the year, and actually before the year even starts, is we map out all of the fundraising, right? So we have a tracking spreadsheet on like kind of expected revenue from each partner. A lot of what we do the year before going in is where I'm tracking fund placements a lot of the time. So like who we actually gave assets to, think about it. We're all salespeople. If you're contributing money to something from your own spending budget, you're going to want an ROI. So like having that tracking of fund placements or even total assets, anything you can show that to support the DCIOs, the record keepers, and the amount of business that you're doing with them, I've found to be extremely helpful. Also, they tend to get paid on it, so they tend to like you a lot more if you give that information. Otherwise, they split it oftentimes amongst a group of all the other DCIOs around the country if they can't track it and assign it. So that's kind of the year before, right? Is you do the sponsorship prep, then year of, like, we get the dates set up, and we're big proponents of calendar blocking. So not just getting the times of the events on the calendar, but getting the prep time of the event on the calendar, getting the follow-up time. The biggest mistake I made in my first year was just not blocking out like the night after and the day after, because I'd get client meetings booked those days, and I'd be doing a client meeting when really I needed to do what Joe and team was talking about, which was hit the follow-up ASAP, right? So calendar blocking on all of your prep. And that's kind of at an annual level to start the year. And then once the actual event comes up, the nice thing is Isabella and Fred and all them, they reach out for a prep call with Mark Lester and team to see kind of pipeline and how that's going. And then we have a call before each event with the actual DCIOs and record keepers who can be part of the program. If you're doing benefits, right, your benefits people, whoever's going to be presenting. And my biggest piece of advice there is you're going to get oftentimes, especially if you start doing this for a while, a lot of repeat customers, and you're going to think, great, they know it. Never assume anybody remembers what you talked about the time before. I mean, it's the same thing with a finalist presentation. If you're going with a team and a sales, like never assume they know and remember what we talked about before and kind of what the expectation is, what the points are, to not sell their own product, right? To make sure it's educational. So, and sometimes in person, I've found, it just sounds silly, but sometimes I'll ask Fred to say it so I don't sound like the jerk, but it's don't be loud in the back of the room. And I think if you're intentional, like Joe was talking about, and actually intentionally having a plan for where each of those vendors is going to be, that will avoid that, accidental loud chatting in the back of the room, which we've frankly had happen before if we're not intentional about it. So I'll pause there. I threw a lot of information. Is that a good starting point, Fred?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that it's something I learned, just going to the first meetings. After about 20 or 30 meetings in the beginning, I thought, oh, I don't have to really listen. I've heard everything. And then I realized it's not like they're bringing up new issues necessarily. It's what's going on with them. And the more I stay engaged throughout the entire program, and I think you want your partners to be engaged. And we do, and they're used to being at a meeting, sitting in the back, looking at their email. If they're there, they have a lot of expertise and a lot to add. So I think that's a great point on that. So Ken, you do a great job in that the day of the meeting, and you actually write everybody's name on the board. And I mean, how are you preparing for and during the meeting, some of the best practices you're seeing?
And I appreciate it, Fred, for having me on the call today. And just to piggyback off of what Cameron stated, because he did a great job. And I think that is an attestament to what Fred and his team do in guiding you to, not only putting it together for the very first time, which it sounds like there's a few folks on the call today that are doing it for the first time, but not only giving you the guidance as to what to do in preparing roadmap, if you will, but continuing that guidance year over year. So I have to give credit to Fred and his team. We also deal with Isabella and Elizabeth on our events, and they do a great job in helping us prepare as well. Not a whole lot that I want to add to what Cameron does, because like I said, learning it from the experts firsthand, you sort of put that in your playbook and continue to run with it. I think what I will add to it, and I know that there's going to be a section on this after this session with my partner Walt on the funding of the program itself is, and let me take a step back. I want to give Joe DeMoyer a lot of credit, because what he stated as a learning point is don't delay, don't belabor the fact this event is coming up. You want to be well prepared in advance so that you're not worrying about anything last minute. But getting in contact with your DCIO partners or your vendors, funding is a huge prep point for this, as Cameron stated, and you want to sort of tackle that well in advance, even the year before, as far as the upcoming events are concerned. But that process takes on a whole new stage as far as getting ready for these events. And obviously, we do have our partners that we deal with consistently, ones that we want to bring on as new partners and things of that nature. Is the prep work and getting them ready. You want to be able to, there's 3 different things that we try to tackle in reaching out to our fund partners. One, obviously, the keynote speaker. Fred gave us a list of expenses that we can offer to these folks to see what type of role they want to play in these events. But finding out who your keynote speaker is in advance, and having them prepped, finding out who your panelists are, and your panelists can range anywhere between, I would say, a minimum of 4, as many as 7. You can have those panelists on there, and the more you have, obviously, the more money that you can possibly bring in and bank for that event or even future events going forward. So you want to work with your investment partners, your DCIOs, to one, obviously continue to cultivate that relationship, but also, funding of this program is pretty expensive. Sorry about that, Fred, but you got to find the funding and continue to find the funding in order to continue to maintain your spot on the TPSU events year over year. Lastly is just finding out who your breakout session individuals are. So again, each one of these has a different dollar amount to it, but prepping well in advance so that you're not worrying about where the money's coming from, I think is the biggest thing that I've learned over the past 4 or 5 years in doing this event. So outside of that, prep work for that day, as Cameron stated, it's a good idea to, one, we carve out a good week and a half. Walt is our speaker during the day, and we carve out about a week and a half just to prep for what we're going to talk about and be able to sharpen those skills as far as what we're going to talk about that day, but also other things that are going to happen. I know Fred stated that I write things down on the wall. Well, part of the program is getting to know your audience. Not only at the get-go, but also ongoing. You want to intermingle and create those relationships throughout the day so that you have, the blessings, if you will, for lack of a better term, to reach out to those folks at the end of the day to not only just, see if you can help them, but eventually ask them for their business. Is to, get in there, I write the folks' names down, and then from there, we get to know them a little bit more for about 15 minutes of the presentation. to see number of folks that they have, what kind of industry that they're in, and then also why they're there. Why did they decide to attend that day? And I think that's the biggest tool that we can harbor is why they're there, so that we can ultimately find a cure for whatever solution they're looking for. And then outside of that, be involved. In preparing for this thing, know that you're going to be talking to a good bit of folks, whether they range from 10 participants in it to, as many as 50, 60 participants there. Be prepared to talk to folks and try to gather a relationship with them, so that, again, it makes more sense when you're reaching out to them, who you are and why you're calling, and not just be that mouse in the corner of the room just listening.
And so what Ken is referring to is when we have in-person meetings, we go around the room and everyone says where they're from, their name, their role, and why they came. And it's a great opening. What we had to do during the virtual is we'll have a poll, and we can see how many, the number of employees. So we have different tranches and what they're looking at. What are the issues, the top 3 issues, and the top 2 are always fiduciary and financial wellness. Lately, or this year, was the new legislation, CARES Act, secure, actually CARES more than secure, but CARES Act and that kind of thing. So the other thing that we do, and we actually took this from Joe Denoyer's group, was for the panel, especially in person, in their folder, there's a form they can fill out what questions they want the panel to review. We find that they're more apt to do that through questions and writing it down than just raising their hand and asking the panel. And that has been a huge, huge benefit. And the other thing that we do during the program and when we attend and virtually can is we give you an endorsement at the end. We're very careful not to have sales and marketing, but we talk about the value that you bring, that you're a thought leader, and all the ideas that you've brought to the program. We say, if your advisor's doing this, that's great. If they're not, we really recommend that you talk to Cameron and have his group review your plan and that kind of thing. So Jim, what are some of the things that you're finding? You've done a lot of programs with us during the program to get engagement, topics that seem to resonate in running the program, both virtually. I think you've only done one virtual, but the in-person programs as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to make your audience comfortable right out of the gate. And so how do we do that? We try to do that by, number one, remove the element of surprise. They're all sitting there, they're wondering what to expect. So we try to tell them the WIIFM, what's in it for me, and what they're gonna take away from this meeting. And I try to inject a little humor. That's just my style. I'm able to do that subtly. I might say something like, I started with E.F. Hutton, and I'll make reference to the when E.F. Hutton talks, people, and everybody, and 3/4 of the people can say, oh, people listen, just kind of get them engage them. Do you remember those television ads, and just try to just make a real nice, open, comfortable environment. And then I like to get into what's in it for me, and what our objectives are is we're here to provide beneficial information for you, and for you to be able to operate your plan in an efficient manner, and most importantly, to effectuate better participant retirement readiness and income security. And I think everybody, we try to move away from what I think our industry has done in the last couple decades, which is the 3 F's: funds, fees, and fiduciary. And I would add a 4th F in using FAIR around funds, fees, and fiduciary, and try to focus on this. What we're really all engaged about doing is providing retirement income security. And then in that same process, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to differentiate myself from their current advisor. And Fred mentioned we wear several hats. I am the founder of a technology company that we have that takes a liability-driven investing approach, a defined benefit approach, participant by participant, which is called iJoin. And we use that gamification technology interface or user experience for these participants, which is a real differentiator. And I think that that's really what we're finding in this COVID environment where people can't gather their participants, their employees, and have us come in and do the education like we've done in the past. This virtual, this iJoin virtual experience, which is also different than just target date funds. It's a target return. It's taking the defined benefit approach of identifying the actuarial assumption per participant and treating each of their 401k accounts as if it's their own defined benefit plan. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll have our panelists maybe as a third party, if you will, talk about LDI, what liability driven investing is. And some people will know about it because they have a defined benefit plan and others don't. But the takeaway from all that is I find that people think it's a very logical approach. It's more logical than target date funds that's based on one data point. And by taking all the other data points that we have readily available on the record keeping system or the payroll system, which is up to 150 data points, it just seems to be a little bit more of a customized approach.
I know one of the things that you do, I think it works, is you have video, 2 or 3 minute video in there, and that breaks things up versus just a PowerPoint. I know it works. I do at my TPSU, or actually at the trial opening session for the CKP. So if you can put a video in there that makes sense, and yours is really well produced on that. So Cameron, what are some of the things that you've found in the virtual, while we're still in virtual, that you've been able to do, or you're trying to do to make virtual better, and that's different maybe than the in-person?
Yeah, so I mean, starting with the challenge, right? Like the challenges in person is what Ken was talking about, going around the room and getting everybody to talk about themselves is, in my opinion, like that was like the secret to success in doing that well, right? Like not just when you ask somebody why they came and they're like, oh, I'm just here to freshen up my knowledge. It's like, well, no, like dig into that, like help ask probing questions, or say, other people have come here because they're trying to figure out how to pass testing. Are you passing testing? Like things like that to lay out trends. And so with the virtual, it's hard because you're not getting that, you're getting the whole. So what we're doing to try to overcome that challenge of not being able to kind of have the back and forth dialogue. And frankly, I mean, it's also a little bit harder to have like humor and it's a lot easier to be humorous in person. So you're trying to be as entertaining as possible. But what we found was the poll is great, but also kind of like asking people to actually respond in the chat has been the newer thing we're trying. Because when they just respond to a poll, they're one of many numbers, right? But when they're actually, like, if you just ask a question in the middle of your presentation, like, how many people have, respond in the chat, how much, this was a game I played, right? Like, how much equity do you think your target date fund has when somebody is 65 years old? And just guess, right? And like, we let people guess in the chat. Now you're seeing them, now you're seeing their specific responses. You can kind of follow up with that. You can actually compare that when you do the research after, if they're even close or not. Things like that, where you're actually getting the chat. But I mean, full disclosure, virtuals, it's hard. It's really hard to engage because, I had some prospects I'm really close with tell me, Cameron, I was there for, an hour, then I got pulled, somebody, called me and I got pulled away. So like trying to stay as engaging as possible through the whole time, I think is going to be your biggest thing. And the mindset that we're trying to take, especially with the panelists, because like our first one, we had so many people drop off with the panel, and I'll be honest, like it wasn't my strongest panel, like of presenters. So now what we're trying to do is really be critical of who's on that panel, especially virtual, and we're trying to treat it like a TV show. Like I'm not like saying this isn't just a normal seminar. Like treat it like a TV show, like flash, like loud, like be energetic. Use some examples, right? Something we're even experimenting right now with my presentation is actually using like physical props. I forget who was saying that they actually are doing the custom videos. We've been doing custom videos with like physical props to like show, basic concept things like that. So Fred, like the answer is like, it's hard for sure, but try everything, be as engaging as possible, because I mean, if any of you have done like an RFP for a provider finalist and sat on the client side and watched all of those Zoom calls back to back, like by the end of it, your ears are bleeding, right? Like you're so bored. So it's just keep it as energetic as possible, keep it as entertaining as possible. And it's a challenge, but I think, you know, you're all professionals and can definitely rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I think, Colin, that's a great point. When I open, I ask, you know, how many people, you know, it's their only job, right? And when we're in person, they get to raise their hands, and only job being retirement. I've been doing it in the chat room, and people are actually responding. We'll get about a third of the people say, no, it's not, and they get to hear it. But I think to your point, you know, is if you can ask a question like, okay, of those who have automatic enrollment, what's your starting deferral rate? So if they're at a low starting deferral rate, you know, that's an opportunity for you to go and talk to them. So use that chat versus just the formal poll. We did have a question from Allison. Yeah, we do use videos and not so much music, but if you want to have a video, that works very well. This is a good format for that. So we have it. And to Colin's point, yeah, I'm sorry.
Is anybody, or are you recording these programs?
I don't know if we're recording because we're a little bit concerned. DJ, do we record the programs?
No, we do not.
Yeah, I think we're concerned about privacy on that, and we haven't gotten permissions from all the providers to do that. So I think there are some issues around that going, and
yeah, there's some law that prevents you from doing it.
Yeah, we have not. And I mean, if we told people up front, I guess we could, but we haven't seen the value that overcomes, you know, the downside of that so far, but we're open to it. The other thing I would just highlight from what Cameron said about the panel, sometimes the panel is you have 4 panelists, you have, you know, 45 minutes, you give each one 10, and it goes, you know, it's like one person speaking after another. What I find is better is, you know, they all get to make an opening statement, and then you're asking them questions like a TV show. I think that's a really good analogy versus just having them do monologues one after another. And we have not found a good way to get more Q&A from there and get the questions. Maybe we can do a pre-program, hey, what questions do you want? Or even just seed them, you know, before in the invitation, we say what questions or things you want us to focus on. Yeah. Cameron, were you going to say something or no?
Yeah. I think what we are trying to do is, like I've said, hey, try to stump the panel, right? Like just to try to get people to ask any kind of question. The hardest question you could think of, stump the panel. And I'll be honest, sometimes people can actually stump the panel if you have all these CIOs and no record keeping partners up there, but that's where you come in as the advisor, right, and help. But I think trying to make it a game as much as possible has been the most I've gotten. The other thing I found is if you can invite clients, whether it's in person or virtual, that's hugely helpful because clients sell you, especially in person when they're sitting next to somebody, like, and they talk how great you are and how much they love you. But also the virtual ones, when I've invited my clients, they are more comfortable with me already. Like they're asking questions, and that tends to be kind of a nice way to lead and get other people to feel more comfortable in asking questions and create, you know, more of that environment.
We have talked about gamification. What I do is I say that if we use a code section or an acronym, or any speaker does, and it hasn't already been defined, we fine them for $5. And we get those people, you know, now more engaged saying, hey, you know, Cameron just used 408B2, you know, and so just anything you can do and make it funny. If you don't get people, if you're not doing some humor, you pretty much are in a deficit, right? Because they're just now listening. So really try to inject humor, video, chat, questions, everything. The virtual is much harder. We're pretty much at the end of time, but we can take a few more minutes. Any questions from people or?
Hey, Fred.
Our other, yeah, go ahead, Walt.
Hey, I just had one little thought. Is one of the things that we do in the prep session is we call out, reach out to the DCIO folks that are going to be on the panel. They have a lot of research that their own investment companies do And so a lot of it is relevant to what we do. And so we try to pose the questions that maybe they're more pointed to or more specific and they got a background in, so that those will be relevant to the folks that are out there sitting in the session.
Yeah,
That's at least some good softball questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Not only do we reach out to each one and ask them, throw us a couple, 2, 3 panelist questions that you would like us to toss to you. We not only get those from each panelist, but we share them with the rest of the other ones. So they have an opportunity to chime in and give their 2 cents as far as that's concerned. As far as defining, and again, it's kind of difficult to create a humorous atmosphere in these, but you can do it. And when Fred talked about the finding of $5 for, I would incorporate that into your presentation, and I would think about things that that your plan sponsors should have. For example, IPS. Something about the IPS, and all of a sudden Fred goes, "Whoop, you're going to be fined for that." And so, what is IPS? Ken, what? And all of a sudden, you're getting your plan sponsors that are saying, "Well, hell, I don't have an IPS." And you got something to follow up on. So there's certain things that you want to do, but I thought that was funny, Fred, that you brought that up, because that is one of the things that you do say is you're not allowed to use those. But you can use them to your advantage. And I think it opens up a humorous conversation after the fact, and will help you delve into some of the issues that these plan sponsors do in fact have.
I had one in Alpharetta where I used MARTA. I said, "Oh, I took MARTA, from the airport." And they're like, "Oh, you didn't define MARTA." And I didn't really even know if I could even know what it was. So
Hey,
that.
Fred?
Yeah.
Hey, there was a question from one of the guys about what other panelists do you use. I use an ERISA attorney typically, specifically on most every panel that I have, because they're going to be stumped with a specific question, whether it's testing or new regulations or you name it. And then you've got somebody there, or I have TPAs in the room that we utilize on a regular basis that are professionals in their own right, and they can specifically talk to the point at hand. So those are just a couple of things that we do.
I've also had auditors on as well, and they talk about audit best practices when people get intimidated by that. We've had employee education specialists to talk about kind of a lot of the challenges that the employees are facing. A lot of people don't connect the dots there and like actually solving employee problems with the benefits that they're designing. And then on that note, we've also had I'm on a part of a benefits shop, right? Like our head of wellness, voluntary benefits specialist, right? And talk about how that impacts financial well-being. If people are living paycheck to paycheck, have accident and disability or, basic insurance, they're one accident away from being destitute, basically. So stuff like that has been total rewards is becoming a lot more popular.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll add one thing to that, Cameron, is that we have those same people, but we'll have them in the audience, not on the panel, because you got to pay for your program. So you want paying customers on the panel. And I usually throw in, and that's just my financial background thing, so have them out in the audience. And what you do is, "Oh, great question. I've got so-and-so here from TPA or auditor from such and such CPA firm, and they can talk about it. And they're on the same side of the table as them, which the viewpoint is they're one of them." So.
And I'd recommend teaming up with like a payroll vendor to get people in the room and inviting them, like saying, "Hey," and I do this with any referral source, like your cost of admission is bringing a prospect, right? So we partner with a lot of folks to get people in the room and put them in the audience to Walter's point. That's a great idea.
Right. So on our final panel and our next to final session, we'll talk about funding the TPSU program. We do have lecturers who fund it themselves, and we're getting a growing number, but many of you are looking to include your partners, your provider partners, and it, as I said, it doesn't just have to be the DCIOs and the record keepers. There are other partners that you work with that you're giving them business, attorneys, CPAs, TPAs, that might be willing to provide funding, but the majority is coming from the DCIOs and the record keepers. We will say that we do get a great response and we have a great reputation in the provider community. In fact, our biggest source of new TPSU lecturers are referrals from wholesalers who have attended our program. I think that American Funds, who has become one of our biggest sponsors, one of their wholesalers spoke at Walt's program in Memphis, and he went back to the home office and said, "Why aren't we doing more? This is exactly what message we have, and there are great companies in the room," and they became our largest sponsor as a result of that. And also, there's fewer events, and so there's less travel, and so there's more resources available. So there's good opportunity for TPSU and the funding. And so on our panel for the funding is Tim Doherty, and Tim is got our Philadelphia program and zone, and he's been doing that for a while, and he's part of Mass Mutual group. Walter Grant is out of Memphis. He used to be with Mass Mutual and is now with GRP Financial. And then Brad Larson, who has got the Southern Florida zone as well as Atlanta. And Brad is with NFP, and Brad is actually a neighbor and a colleague, and we work together in a previous company. So all of them are great practitioners and have done a very, very good job at funding. So this is your opportunity to ask questions on what they're doing. And some of the questions that we asked our panel to respond to are, how do they select the partners, messages that resonate with those partners when they're trying to get them to support the program, including them in the program, and also follow up with them, because it's important for you to follow up to see how the program was for them, and make sure that you are supporting them on that. And I think Cameron mentioned it early, it's best to have a calendar and say, okay, I have got 2 programs, I got 4 programs, this is how much funding I need, and try to do that early on versus waiting 60, 90 days before the program. Have your people lined up, and also present it as an opportunity, and you only have a limited, you only have 1 keynote and 3 or 4 panelists, although I thought with what we did with Tim in his last one, he had 7 panelists, and we're able to navigate that. I think it'd be easier to do that during virtual. I don't think 7 in person would make a lot of sense, but we were able to do it, but we've only got limited spots on the panel. So, before all those spots are taken up, we wanted to see if that was an opportunity. So those are some of the things that we want to talk about. So maybe Brad, we'll start with you, and what's your strategies? Because you've been, extremely successful in getting support.
Yeah, I've been, I guess, pretty lucky to have a good group of folks wanting to support our efforts here in South Florida and Atlanta. And I do kind of a shotgun approach. I create the best way to describe it is a flyer as soon as I get my dates, which I'm a little late getting my dates for this year, but they're pushed out a little further, so it's okay. I usually sometime in December shoot all of my DCIO and record keeper partners an email with what those dates are, and kind of lay out what the sponsorship levels are and what that what corresponds with those sponsorship levels. So I just got the final dates from Isabella yesterday. We had to move one from October to November date. But so I've got my email ready to go, and I'll probably put it out on Monday or Tuesday. And then I start getting responses. And then I'll usually, usually 30 to 60 days ahead of the conference, if I haven't, or the program, if I haven't gotten everybody, if I haven't had all my slots filled, I'll do kind of a, hey, friendly reminder. And then, once I've got those filled, I cease that. And once I finish the program, I start that email campaign back up for the next, I do 2 very similar time frame, one in Atlanta, one in South Florida. And then towards the end of the year, I'll do two, usually within a week or two of each other. And so right after I'm done with the first one, I'll get that email campaign going. Usually fills up pretty quick. So, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a year where I didn't have a surplus. And kind of what I offer to them, which I guess is enticing. And, I'm not going to violate our principles with from a fiduciary perspective on the investment options. And I make that clear to everybody. We have a scoring methodology that we utilize to score funds. And if you have a good fund, there's a good shot that you're going to get some assets. But if you don't, it doesn't mean because you're my sponsor that you get those assets. And they understand that, right? But if it comes down to, I've got a couple of funds that could potentially fill a fund replacement. Obviously, those folks that support us are getting a better chance at getting some assets versus those that don't. And then I promise them and deliver Cameron was alluding to it. We have the assets under management reporting capabilities in our system. So, for the DCIOs, I let them know, what assets we have under management with them, what plans they are, who the record keeper is. So they're always having a difficult time tracking down assets to get paid. So most of them really appreciate that we can report that information back to them. And then also, every quarter as we do fund replacements, they get notice of specific trades that go through. So again, just ways to kind of make it easier on them to track down how they get paid. And so far that's kind of all I do is kind of a flyer with an email campaign and, report back to those folks that support us.
How do you select the partners that you go to? Is it based on your book of business?
Yeah. So obviously with the record keepers, it's folks that we have business with. But there are a couple of record keepers that we don't have business with that we're interested in diversifying our portfolio, if you will. And they know that, right? I mean, I'm thinking of Prudential, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, we had no business with them. And, it took them a couple of years of, making it to finalist presentations. And, lo and behold, they had, a banner year down here in South Florida with 2 large plans of ours that were in transition. Now that's a forever supporter of our business.
Right.
But I don't just take a shotgun and fire it at every record keeper on the planet. I'm a little bit more. I take a little bit more of a shotgun approach with the DCIO folks. Right. One, they usually have more funding capabilities than the record keepers. And sometimes they can wear either hat, right? The Pru DCIO and the Pru record keeper can combine forces and come up with some money. But, I think the DCIO guys and gals are a little bit more interested in trying to participate in events like this and have the budget to do so. So I take a little bit more of a shotgun approach there, and I make sure they understand I'm not going to violate my principles because you support me, but if we get a fund change and you do support me, it increases your odds substantially.
Right. And so, Tim, what are some of the things that you found? I know you have a pretty loyal group, and you a lot of people repeating on that. So.
Yeah, the group, the approach is very similar to the things that you've just heard. Some of the things that we do that support that, I think that all of us are, if we're not already doing it, should be doing it, is, you should have a spreadsheet just to start out with, who are all the providers in the marketplace that you might possibly be doing business with. So that's really where I start is, I just spread out all the cards on the table and I quantify it into a spreadsheet. Get the vendors' names, who's my local IO. I build out that spreadsheet, making sure that I've got the contact information, phone number, email. I've got my dates identified, and I target before I get started really what is the approximate support level that I think is feasible or reasonable from that particular provider based on the relationship. So I think you start with a master spreadsheet to be able to manage your process. And then from there, I think one of the most critical and important things that you can do with the people that are our wholesalers and our other relationships peripheral to the space is that we need to have relationships with them, and we need to give them time. They're looking for your time. They need to have you on their calendar, not probably once a year, but more regularly. And that's very conducive to building a relationship. And I have found that as I build the relationship with these folks, they, in real terms, become your friends. It becomes a community. So, Fred, when you speak to the loyalty factor, yeah, we've got a group, and they all know each other. They all like each other, and it's kind of like they have their own little fraternity going. It's an opportunity for them when they're together with me to be together with each other, and they catch up on things and they chit chat with each other, and it's a little more difficult in the virtual environment, but they know we'll get back to business as usual at some point. But it starts again with creating a list and then curating that list, paying attention to it, paying attention to those people, paying attention to your book of business, paying attention to, as Brad just discussed, the assets you have with each provider, the flows that you give to a provider. I've also found that I've got some folks that we've never done any business with that support us, but they're aware of the at-bats that they get. They care about their at-bats too. How often you present them to someone. So you track your relationships, the assets, the flows, you follow your list. And how about, calling them once in a while? And that's important. I call them rather than wait for them to call on me. Again, that's about the relationship part of it and the community of friendship that you actually have with these folks. And they know I'm too busy to be calling them just for, goofing off purposes. They know I care about the relationship. So calling them and talking to them about your business and just, doing those check-ins. And when they check in with you, take their call. And if you can't, talk to your staff if someone else is scheduling appointments for you, and make sure that they're aware. These people, they get in touch with you. They don't get pushed to the side. They get on your calendar, and then you take time. I work with Colleen Mullen very closely on our retirement plan book. She's on the call right now listening in, and Colleen does the same thing. She makes time for them. And when we've got meetings, I'll bring her into those meetings. And why it matters in part is that they know, hey, Fred, that was pretty cool. Just disappeared and came back. I love it. But they want to talk to Colleen because they know that she's running the searches. They know that when there's an opportunity, she needs to know which funds are the funds that they're getting the new wins. And yeah, we have a scoring system and all that good stuff, but we want to know from them, where are you getting your wins? Where are your flows coming from? So the dialogue is good, means that we care. And beyond being interested in their business, be interested in their lives and understand who's having kids or, whatever else it is that's important to them. Really a mutual respect is really what comes from it. The breakout tables, we would assign a lot of these folks to the breakout tables, and they're critically important to us. And so, we love to have them as plants at those tables and come back to us with all their facts. And then there's collaboration with them. So those are my thoughts on how to manage, fundraising, is to be engaged with these people and have a plan, know what your target is for the revenue, and go after it, track it, get it done.
Yeah, that's great. Well, what are some of the things that you've been pretty successful on getting the support? What are some of the things you're doing that may be a little different than what we heard?
I do a lot of the same things. Where you guys are sitting now, I was about 5 or 6 years ago, Fred, and I had to learn on my own how to kind of garner the monies from the folks. And so I had a record keeper that actually walked me through the process, because he had been doing some of these events with some other folks in different states. And so I work with a long list of folks just like Brad and Tim do. And I don't discriminate. I let anybody who wants to participate. I do have a core nucleus of about 10 that participate all the time. And if I need one to be the keynote, they'll be it. But at the same time, I don't ask somebody to participate if I have no intention of ever doing business with them, or if I have not had any intention doing business with them, because I've had frank conversations with them. They're looking for partners. They're looking for friends. They're not looking for somebody just to take the money. And just like I think Tim was mentioning a second ago, I was on a plan before COVID hit to start doing in between these TPSU meetings, kind of doing quarterly meetings of themselves to follow up with some of these people. And that kind of got turned on its head a little bit, but these people want to help us. They want to assist because it helps them. It's a win-win. It's not a win-lose. And just like Tim said, I've had people that I haven't put a dime with, and in the past year, they've had significant flows go to them because their funds are in filter now. And some have fallen out of filter. So they know it comes around, but just be honest with them, be transparent with them. And, where I started was in my book of business. I wanted to know the people that I already had a vested interest with first, is where I started. And then from there, I talked to other people that they screened well. Maybe they didn't win the business, but they knew I was looking at them. I did incorporate them into the plans. And then also, I'd say set aside time with your DCIO. The one thing after the first year that I did it, and they told me, they said, come talk to me in November, December when we're starting our next year's budget so that I can get you incorporated into that budget, because they only have a limited number of dollars that they can spend. So you need to be really careful that you're not too late to the game, because I've had some that can't do it, or maybe they did the first one, but they couldn't do the second one because there's no resources at the end. So become a partner of them, tell them early, ask, kind of like Brad said, send out a flyer, whatever it is. If you're going to be in this business and use TPSU, they need to know in advance so that they can plan on it. Right. Let's see, the last thing, and I just add on to what Tim said, is you do build long-lasting relationships with these people. I get cards from them. I give them cards of my family at Christmas. We talk about, they say hello at birthdays. And so we've got a really, really, really great relationship with all our providers. And it's just a testament to this program has just brought us closer together. And at the same time, if there's other opportunities in your area, they might let you know about it. If a plan's going out to market, I've had folks tell me about that. So just be a big advocate for them, and they'll help you out as well.
Right. We had a question about compliance, and it is a tricky question, and we have been approved at almost every provider is comfortable supporting it, and with a rare exception, issues with the broker dealer. The way to position, first of all, be careful with compliance. If you do get a compliance question from your broker dealer or your provider, it's probably good to chat with me quickly to make sure that we're positioning this. I tell my staff whenever they get a compliance question that they just get quiet and say, Fred's got to answer that, because the way that we've been able to get this program through is this is a TPSU program. You are a speaker at the program. Yeah, I know that the way we position it and the way we talk about it is your program, but if you position it to the providers as your program and you're getting the money directly, that's going to be almost impossible. It's very, very hard for them to give money directly, and especially in this environment. So what you do, and they say is, no, you're supporting TPSU. I am a speaker at this program, and obviously I benefit from it like you would if you were speaking at a local SHRM or a CPA meeting. The money goes directly to TPSU on that. So that's the way to position it. With broker dealers, some are more sensitive to others, but it's the same positioning with your broker dealer. If you're uncomfortable, and some of our advisors are using in terms of communicating, hey, this provider is willing to support for this much, they're using personal email versus that. I would stay away from outside business activity, OBA. It raises a whole host of issues. because then some broker dealers have issues with, well, if it's an OBA, then it, are you following up with these people to get business under your position as a broker dealer, as a financial advisor? And obviously you are. So tread very lightly, position it that way, but don't get too deep. And if somebody does have further questions, just refer them to me, and I can answer them on it.
Hey, Fred. I know in my previous broker dealer, they had an issue when I first went over back in 12, when I was talking about doing some of these programs.
Right.
And the issue was, is it soliciting? And you're not soliciting, you're just providing them information.
Right.
They're not paying to come to your program. You're not making any money off the program. It's purely academic. And as long as you stick to your guns on that, you'll pass with flying colors.
That's a good point. And they'll sometimes say, well, we need to look at all the presentations. And they're like, when I speak at another conference, do you approve all the presentations from other speakers? And they're like, no. Well, if they want to look at yours, that's one question. But we do not allow broker dealers to review and give an opportunity to approve any of the other materials. But positioning as education, I think, is a great way to do it. And we do not allow any marketing or sales in the curriculum. What happens during the break, what happens afterwards, we can't control that. Before we go back to our panel, any questions or even some experiences, successes, failures, challenges that you guys, anybody who has been doing our program has had with funding that they want to add?
One thing I learned early on, Fred, is that like JP Morgan and American Funds would only fund the school and the meals at the school. So sometimes your provider will only pay the institution that you're having the event at.
I think we're down to just
JP Morgan. Because
Perfect.
American Funds was really good this past year.
Yeah, it was actually Jonathan Young went to your program, Walt, in Memphis and spoke, and he was so impressed with the program and the plan sponsors in the room. He went to the home office and said, why are we not supporting this? And now they're our biggest supporter. And they have
he keeps asking, he wants to be a keynote again.
They only want to be
Good at it.
keynote.
He's
But
a
if
good
you're
one.
lucky enough to get them, they pay $5,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
They don't negotiate on that. And that's another issue, is most of the money is, you have to, there's home office budgets, and then the wholesalers have their own budgets for travel as well as support. Most of the money is coming from the local budgets. I work with the national providers, just the home offices, to make sure they know what we're doing, they're comfortable with their wholesaler supporting it. I don't necessarily try to solicit money, because even with an American Funds, which has some home office support, ultimately it's the decision of the wholesaler, the local wholesaler, on who they want to support based on the relationship they have and the business that they have with them. So, and don't be shy with any, we've had Vanguard has supported these programs. We've had almost every, I don't think there's a provider out there. JP Morgan is sort of the lone vendor only out there. Invesco used to be, but the Oppenheimer merger, Invesco, I think, has changed all of that. Tim, looks like you wanted to say something.
Well, Fred, you had mentioned earlier about how we had 7 panelists this last go round, and that was a highly unusual approach to an extent. But I think in hindsight, looking at it, the feedback that I got from really lots of folks was that it was engaging and it was successful. In fact, the IOs actually liked it quite a bit. And I'm not suggesting it's for everyone, but in my case, what had happened was, we had a number of commitments from folks that were supporting, and I just didn't feel comfortable with some of the size of the commitments that we were getting, not having a place for them in the presentation. And you may recall that conversation that we had, how do I, leave these folks out? And we all know that they get it. And the answer you get from a lot of them often is, you just tell me what you need from me. I'm happy to support the program. You know, if you need me to speak, you not speak. But it's still trying from my end, showing them, you know, that they matter. And I thought about it, you know, and virtual is tough sometimes. I can sit on the other side of the computer at home, and I'm looking at my email, and I'm on mute, and I'm in and out of a call somewhere, and you know, I'm not engaged as much some of the time. But if you're rapid firing with me and I'm going to miss something, you're changing topics, you're changing subjects, I got to lock in, I got to tune in. And that's what we did. So we broke it into 3 segments through our 45-minute session, roughly speaking. And we went, you know, 7 to 8 minutes per person. And I created sort of a rapid fire and went into a, you know, 15-minute segment with 2 IOs who took an issue and had a dialogue. And I would curate that dialogue. And then they were done. And then we went to the next 15 minutes and the same thing. And then the next 15 minutes. And in that one, we included a third who happened to be my American Funds record keeper or IO and, you know, wholesaler. And he had gotten us an American Fund sponsorship. So I kind of felt, you know, needed to give him some attention there. So that was how we did that. And I think it gave all these folks who were engaged with me a feeling like they were engaged, and they're asking, you know, can we be involved in the next one?
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't really recommend 7 or 6, but it made us be more disciplined, and it worked actually really well. We had 3 subjects, and it didn't feel like we were cramped at all.
You could extend it a few minutes if you need to, Fred.
We don't change time on this one. Now you're like, don't get crazy on me here. To that point, we do, you know, I think we've had like a second keynote, and we've changed times a little bit. I know that Brad has got a partner who does the non-qualified, so we did that. And we can change things up a little bit, but we try to keep to the format because it seems to work pretty well. But I think we actually did take an extra 5 or 10 minutes for Tim's panel on that. It went a little bit longer on it. We're getting close to on the time. This is a great opportunity either to ask questions about funding. If you do, I will say that sort of the thing we have not discussed is in the room is a lot of this depends on the size of the book of business. If you have $1 billion, you know, the opportunities, even if you're not necessarily doing business with them, are greater than if you have 250 million. And, you know, I know that, you know, Brad is got not only, you know, a relatively large book of business, but he's affiliated with a very large organization. But we do find that, you know, I think when we started working with Tim, you were probably just, you were even under 100 million in DC assets. That's grown quite a bit. But, you know, you can do it. But I would also caution that if you do have a relatively smaller book of business, that there may be, you may have to fund it yourself in a portion of it. And it's not always 100% of funding. And we will talk with you when we initiate or before we even sign the contract, so we can give you a realistic sense of what we're seeing and what kind of books are getting funded and for how much. So any final questions for our panel or comments about funding on that? One question we get, which providers are, you know, funding TPSU? And the answer is all of them. And it's really more about who you work with and the relationships that you have. So we could say, you know, T. Rowe, which has been a very, very big funder of ours. If you don't have a good relationship with the local T. Rowe wholesaler, you don't give them time when they call you, and you don't haven't give them a new piece of business in the last 3 years, it doesn't matter if T. Rowe is a big supporter of TPSU, that wholesaler is not going to support you. So it's really about your book and your relationship. So.
Hey, Fred, one last point to make reference of for the folks who are thinking about where their flows went. Don't forget that sometimes when, we all have different products that we have access to. So I'm an RPAG member. So, for example, if you have an asset that flows into one of those target date series that happens to have multiple money manager sleeves, you're pretty immediately going to have some flows with a lot of those managers. So don't overlook that a single trade may not be related to just a single source for you to follow up with.
That's a good point. And Brad, just one final question to you is, when you go to your record keeper, what I've heard from record keeper is it doesn't matter if you have a lot of business with them. It's really recent business, because that's how the wholesaler gets paid, right? So if you haven't done a new plan with Prudential in the last 5 years, it doesn't really matter. In the case for you, you did a couple of plans, so that helped. Is that true?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think activities just is important for them a lot of times. Obviously, they'd like to be the only vendor to present, but that's not the real world.
Sure.
And, just using Pru as an example again, we had them in, 3 or 4 finalist presentations that they didn't get. But our goal was to try and build a relationship there and build that business. And so they stuck it out with us. But I didn't go do the same thing with, no offense, One America, because we didn't really want to grow that business. So
you didn't ask One America for funding.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I think it's been said, but again, it's up to you how you want to do it. But if there's a vendor, I'm just not going to work with them. Their funds aren't passing our screen. It's not somebody that really meets our needs. Taking money from them is going to just cause problems for you down the road on that. So again, we don't dictate how much you should be getting and who you should be getting it from, but it just sort of makes sense.
Hey, Fred, they also like CITs too, and RPAG's got a great suite of them.
CITs are, one of the comments we heard from our CIO roundtable with Investment News is mutual funds are going the way of the checkbook in 401k plans. So CITs are big, and that's another vendor. Wilmington Trust has become, from time to time, we've seen them support the program because they're, to Tim's point, Wilmington Trust is the CIT wrapper for the FlexPath, and they get money and assets on that as well. So let's shift in our last, I think it is 45 minutes, but we may not need the whole thing. This is our what's working, what's not working session. For those of you who haven't done a program or haven't done an in-person program, session 4, which is right after the panel, we put plan sponsors into groups of 4 to 6 based on the size of the employees, because we think that they might have similar issues. Larger companies and smaller companies might have different issues. And we say, talk about what's working and not working. And it's been the most successful, it's the highest rated session that we have. So here, we'd love to hear things you like, and that's great about TPSU and maybe some of the things we've done in virtual, and we love to hear it. But we're also interested, probably more interested in what could we do better, or what new things should we be doing. And don't worry about if it sounds a little, well, this might be a little bit too extreme, or because even if we don't do exactly that idea, there may be part of that idea that we can use on that. And just to give you, like what we've been doing, for example, new is at the end of, during the panel, well, first of all, we take pictures from the back of the room, so we're not, no faces of the plan sponsors of the room with you in the front, and we post those immediately on social media. We take pictures of the panel when they're up there, and then we've tagged, whenever you've got a person's name, you're more likely to get hits on LinkedIn on that. And so one of the ideas I thought was maybe we could tag speakers, your speakers and you on the LinkedIn before the program. And so we've also talking with Hub and NFP about doing a separate benefits panel. I heard today Stump the panel. We can challenge our audience to ask questions that would stump them. And then I also wrote down questions. We might ask the registrants if they have questions before they come into the program. What are other ideas that you guys might have, or things that we could do better, or things that you think really, really worked? And, we love to hear that as well. And maybe we can do more of that. And so we're really looking for interaction here. And we also, a lot of times the providers sit in the back of the room and just want to listen. We do want to hear from the providers, because you are an essential partner in this, not only in terms of the funding, but the content that you bring and the interaction. And a lot of you have been to probably more, you get the opportunity to go to more programs than our lecturers do. So we really do want to hear from you guys as well. So what can we do better, new ideas, and what are the things you think are really, really working that we might be able to expand on?
I think it would be interesting to communicate to the plan sponsors what's working in this COVID virtual environment relative to participant education or helping them prepare for retirement readiness. I mean, it's certainly an obstacle for us, it's an obstacle for them, it's an obstacle for the participants, since we're not doing gatherings of education meetings where we're coming in and being the educator.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That's a good idea. What else can we do better? We have a very strong educational program, getting very good response. What can we do better? And what can we do better to support you, your partners, your clients? What else? Don't everybody talk at once, because then I can't hear you. So if you do want to put it in the chat room, that's good too. Any ideas?
I look forward to exploring a little bit more directly with Mark Lester about some of the things that he talked about yesterday, and how can we reach out to associations locally and things like that to get them on our list of invitees. I think that's a tremendous resource that TPSU is offering us.
Yes.
And I don't think I could attend this meeting without singing the accolades of Isabella and Liz as it relates to Liz being the bill collector, checks in the mail kind of follow up. And Isabella, as far as keeping us on track for, having our program and having the content on a timely basis and getting it posted. And again, the entire TPS, I know it's deeper than your entire team is just, the bench has got a lot of depth and breadth, and I express my gratitude to all of you for what you do.
I'll second that.
I'd have to echo that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Isabella is very modest, but Isabella is actually a medical doctor from Germany, and she was a neighbor of ours in Jupiter, and my wife recruited her when her kids got old enough. So she's incredible experience, and her husband is literally a rocket scientist. So it's quite an extraordinary family. But Isabella keeps me on my toes as well. So yes, thank you for that. And Liz is great. I mean, I think we're sending out between 1,600 and 1,800 invoices a year for TPSU, and keeping track of all of that and having a P&L is really quite extraordinary to have that, along with our other businesses, because TPSU is just half of the businesses that we have. So thank you for that. Any other ideas or questions, or like, why don't we do this? Anything else?
I was just going to follow up on what Jim said. I mean, we were actually kind of thinking along the same lines. I was thinking about the association angle, and more in the sense when you, have a client that maybe is a large association. So for example, we work with one that's got 3,100 members. Have you thought about just doing an event specific to their members, or is it best to really open it up to everyone?
I think that we wouldn't want to limit it to that unless we felt like that is going to be a huge event. I mean, in some ways it's like, then it would be their event and they would probably want to control it. And we do want to support them. What we have been doing is we've been letting associations that have been very supportive of us speak, so that right after my introduction, they'll do a 5-minute, here's our association, here's what we do, here are the benefits, blah, blah, blah. So we can, Allison, if you've got a good relationship with one, we can incorporate. Now, what we do ask is that, they do email and support and promote our program, but we haven't really, we're open to it. We haven't done that. You guys have access to two resources that are really, really almost impossible to find in the industry. One is getting CE approval for your materials. I mean, we've had advisors come to us and say, can you get ours approved? And we're like, no, it's too hard. But you have it through the TPSU. And the second is that association. I mean, we have Mark Lester. I don't know if Mark is on the phone, but Mark is probably not talking out of school, but Mark and I went to high school together in New York, and he contacted me about 10 years ago. He was a principal and founder of a headhunter group, very successful group working with HR people in the medical and IT field, and said, I'm getting towards the end of that and I want to do something else. And so he is a consummate, very accomplished professional. And he has relationships with 400 associations, and he develops those relationships and knows those people. And if you're not calling him and contacting him to say, hey, what associations are in my area? Who is the leader of that association? Do they have opportunities to speak? Can I contribute materials to their publications? Do they have an event, now virtual? He is open. There's no additional cost to leverage that resource, and he can support you. So if you're not contacting Mark and leveraging him, you're missing a big opportunity in that. What else can we do to help you and support you? And again, think outside the box. Think, it wasn't a terrible idea. We had, actually, it was Colin Clark said, can you get CE approval for our materials? And the answer was no, but still, it was good to ask because it is really hard. Yes, go ahead.
So, we do a great job providing CE to so many others, and many of us have enough designations of our own where we need to obtain CE credits, whether it be CFP or, for American College PACE, et cetera. Many of these organizations, if you're a lecturer of some sort, will allow you to apply your credit there. It could be helpful to us if we collaborated to understand really what credentials this group predominantly has that maybe you could help us to gain some CE credits for with our time spent, because if we all the time spent prepping a program, forget that you're doing the adjunct lecture time, we're only going to probably get some number of hours for the AL time, but there's a lot that goes into it, and it would save us time elsewhere when we need to meet those other credential requirements. That would be helpful.
It's a good point. The way we work with like CFP, for example, is we just make sure they know who we are and they approve our materials, and then it's up to you to submit that. For example, I would say, and Steph, you're on the line. I see you there. I don't know if you're live, but for example, it strikes me we should be able to get you 5 hours for this training on that. We have in the past, haven't we, Steph?
Yeah, we have tried. They don't turn it around quickly. They want to know what it is, and some of them don't give any credit for panels alone. So but we can see what we can do I guess their attitudes and their how they approve has changed a bit since we've gone into a virtual environment. So yeah, we can certainly find out.
It just seems to me that this 5 hours of training should qualify for, it's a conference. We're talking about really important things. So, but
I know, but the problem is the panels, they don't know what's going to happen. So it's hard to tell them what the panel
keynote
actually will talk about.
Yeah. Okay. But let's also explore if they are a lecturer and they are participating, as the lecturer, whether it's their own or even the keynote, not the panel. So we'll explore that. It's a good question, Tim.
Yeah, IMCA would be a good organization. Now the IWI, if we can get continuing education for our SEMAs, and they have a retirement program now too. So maybe they'd be even more interested since they've launched their retirement advisor program.
Okay. What else can we do? What else can we do better? What else can we include?
Fred, we've talked about the possibility of creating some kind of a collateral repository of some sort from the various vendors. Has that ever gotten any further conversation or legs?
So it's a good point. I did mean to mention one of the, during the conducting a program, one of the things that we do allow and has been successful is if you want to put collateral materials that people can look at, whether from you or your partners, we put a link to Dropbox in the chat. And so people can look at that. We do have a repository of slides from lecturers and also from vendors that you guys have access to. I think it's 150 slides or so. Is that right, Steph?
Yeah, it's right around there.
You can use that. And I know, Tim, you've leveraged that from a lot from the Allianz slides, and you can leverage those slides. In terms of collateral from the providers, I think rather than having a repository and they can do it, I think there's an opportunity as you're going out and reaching for support to say, hey, if you do support me, not only are you there, but we'll present your collateral and make it available to everyone that's coming in. Otherwise, I'm not sure how that collateral will get used. Am I missing something there, Tim?
No, I think that's accurate. And also the fund company is not sure how it's going to be used either. Some of them have requirements that if you show one slide, you've got to show all 20 slides or whatever their requirements are. So I think you as the adjunct lecturers have more pull on grabbing a couple of images from the providers as opposed to us.
And then also we have the issues of some material is approved for financial professionals, some is approved for the general public. So we got to be careful in managing that versus having a repository on it.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I think the toughest thing we do, at least for our group, is the sponsorship. Getting money is, out of these guys is just, it's always a challenge. And even if they commit sometimes, just again, thanks Liz for all the follow-up you do. And she's like the bill collector. But is there any thought or any way that, I think TPSU has such clout in the marketplace, and I think you have tremendous clout with the home offices, but that trickling down to some of these local reps just doesn't seem to resonate. So there's a couple things. How can we resonate to the local reps that TPSU has this incredible credibility? And secondly, is there a way to get support from the home office that could offset the expenses that us as adjunct lecturers need to, generate to be able to do what we do?
Yeah, I'll do that. Jim, I try to visit with and work with and know most of the home offices. So I'll try to do that because we had such success with American Funds. I mean, it's just been a boon for us. I'll try to do more of that because I think the reputation at TPSU is very strong with the providers. And it's really more of putting together a fund that local wholesalers can use to augment their own local budget. So I think that's a really good idea. And we'll see what we can do, on it.
Thank you.
While you're thinking, there's an ask from us in terms of recruiting. When the hardest thing we do is getting people to come, and it might seem, our success has been pretty good, especially, where we started. And, we're probably, if we're at 25 companies and 30 people, we're probably right exactly where we want to be. And it varies by zone on that. But we can really use your help. So for example, who do you want us to invite? I know Steph said it's 20, but if there are prospects and people you're hitting on and you want us to send special invitations, bringing your clients is really, really helpful. It's not a matter of, if you bring a client, we're not counting it. And, we have a minimum of 13 companies that, in the contract, but having clients, because it's good for the room. It's also good interaction when you can invoke them. But are there centers of influence that we can invite and maybe leverage at some point? Attorneys, TPAs, CPAs, payroll companies who can invite clients. So we really can use that. If you're putting it on your LinkedIn, putting it on social media, promoting it out in the market. We really, we're partners here. And the more people we have in the room, virtual or in person, the better it is for both of us. So,
Fred, I think you're on something that's interesting. You said come up with ideas, whether they're good or bad or outside the box. So who knows whether this is good or not. But centers of influence are not populating the majority of our attendees in those sessions. It feels to me like if TPSU's got such clout, that's where we maybe want to be able to run some one-off sessions. Can be virtual, however you want to do it, but you want to be able to approach, let's say a reasonable sized CPA firm and run a session for them. You don't need to do any real marketing. We found the organization. We're customizing a TPSU sponsored so we can get some CE credits for them. We've got our IOs and our record keepers and our TPAs. They'd all love to sit on a virtual panel. It doesn't have to be a 5-hour day, but if you gave us something that wasn't really a high cost driver, you didn't have to do the marketing. We do it, but we could leverage this brand and we could get it in front of, CPAs, attorneys, our local folks that we need to build relationships with, and we're giving them the credit hours that they need. I think maybe that's worth talking about.
I think that's a good idea. And if TPSU could just template, kind of a postcard or a letter or whatever, so that we can reach out with consistency in the marketing of TPSU. I don't think you want all of your people going in different directions as it relates to how we would position something like that. So if you would template it, it would leverage our time. It would also give consistent messaging in how you want us to go and, grab those TPA firms or CPA firms or law firms.
Where I think that would take us is with any success, and those organizations like what they're seeing, and if we properly curate the message, they can become our prospectors. They can be driving their clients to attend our plan sponsor sessions.
Yeah. So we had this idea all the way back, I think, when we did it at the University of Chicago Adjunct Lecturer Training, and Greg Poblarski, I remember, Pops came up with this idea, and we literally hired people and had a program to say, let's market directly to centers of influence. And we had way back Paul Diatola, who was one of our original, he's in Rochester, his CPA firm that does a lot of business says, hey, we want to do a private label TPSU program for the CPA clients. That they got like 2 registrations. They didn't really put the effort in, and I'm not even sure when they mailed it. In terms of centers of influence, we had somebody calling up centers of influences to try to work with you. It's got to be your centers of influence. So I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm just saying what didn't work, so we don't repeat that. And it can't be like an attorney you don't work with. It's got to be an attorney that you do work with currently. We are more than happy to support you if your CPA or centers of influence wants to put a program together for their clients on fiduciary training. We have a program like retirement committee education, which has got a PowerPoint, an hour presentation, and a 3 hours of online, and all of them carry continuing education for their clients. But I think that you want to be careful about doing that template, because the hard work is recruiting. Hard work is getting people to come. I mean, it is a full-time 24/7 effort for us. And just giving that template, the problem, let's say you do it, let's say with Maria, for example, you're a CPA and they do it and 3 people show up. It may not be your problem, but it's sort of, they're like, well, Tim, this was really, we put a lot of effort and we didn't get anyone. I'm thinking about, when you brought it up, I'm thinking about doing a program just for centers of influence on how they can leverage TPSU and how they can, it helps their clients and what issues we're bringing. We're, I don't know how hard it would be, but, CPE credits are it took us, until December to get CE credits. We're Sherman HRI for the virtual side of things. But if we had like this sort of national sessions just for CIOs, and then you could say to it would give a little bit of an introduction to your CIOs, like, wow, this is great, I could do this. Because I think the best we can hope for, which is a really great thing, is they're inviting their clients to your program. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that the CPAs have a different appetite for what they want to discuss than our typical, let's say, and I don't like the word typical, but, say HR attendee, there's a lot of HR in the room. Those folks are concerned about their fiduciary liabilities in a heavy way, and participant outcomes. And the CPAs are more concerned about plan types and design and how they're helping their clients achieve their objectives. So I think the idea that they are different audiences does call for different content and how to approach it.
I would be willing to do like 3 national programs, for like one for attorneys, one for CPAs, and maybe one even for TPAs about TPSU and how it helps and how they can leverage, and even some, they're always looking to work with more advisors like you. So I think there's something there, if we could do that.
And I want to resurrect an old idea based on an article that I think you just wrote, which I think we're all aware that there seems to be a spike in fiduciary liability insurance premiums. And so I think the P&C community is another community that actually addresses this side of it. We don't tend to sell it ourselves. It's typically the P&C agent that does. There have been in the past programs. So this again is one of those, is it a good idea? I don't know yet, but I recall there being a program from, what was it, NAPFLA or, NAPA, the liability insurance company, that as long as they partnered with, the client partnered with Fiduciary Benchmarks, they were going to get a discount in their P&C premium. And what we do here as a group is train fiduciaries. And I think in your article you wrote that if you work with your agent and submit, your process and, certify in some way what you're doing, that you may be able to negotiate a better premium. Just kind of wondering whether if TPSU were to partner with a national provider of some sort, whether, having the credential or a training of, 5 hours with us, combined with the submission of what our client service plan is, that maybe we can get our folks, better pricing. Because it sounds like from your article, it's a real issue.
I think it's a good idea, actually. I'll look in and reach out to some fiduciary insurance providers, PNC providers, and we might be able to get some national support for you guys from these, as well as offer a discount on fiduciary insurance to the people who attend and that program. I think that's a really good idea. I will pursue that. I want to open it up to people who haven't spoken, and even if you're relatively new, a question sometimes coming from outside, it's like, well, why don't you do this? Things that, we get it's always say the fish are the last to notice the water. We're used to doing this and it works. And there are things that I'm looking in the chat, and there's a couple of chats I haven't looked at. Oh, we got it. Any other ideas, things we haven't talked about, things that we should be looking at that you think would help the program?
Fred, I got two questions. I guess first, is it possible for those of us that are just joining this fraternity to sit in on one of the meetings that another advisor is doing to see how it works and go through that? Yeah. And then second of all, most of our marketing is towards the CFO, CEO, president type folks making those decisions on moving their 401k. How does the group transition from the HR person that doesn't want to do a lot of extra work to those individuals to get that movement going?
Yeah, so the sitting in, generally, we always ask the permission of the lecturer, but with rare exception, that's always approved because, you're, aware of and keeping quiet and listening, and you're not getting lists of people and you're not interacting, and usually they're from different zones. So yes, that is pretty much available. Getting the presidents and the CEOs and the CFOs to come to these meetings is a real challenge, to spend 5 or 6 hours on this of their day and even 3 hours on a webinar. I think realistically for TPSU, the best you can do is, even though we're getting the HR and the finance, and I would say 10 or 20% are the people you mentioned, the CFOs and the senior managers. What you've got is an internal salesperson. You've got somebody who can help you to navigate through. I'm just not sure, Todd, that there's anything that we can do. Maybe there's a different program that we could have, maybe a shorter program for alumni of TPSU to invite their senior managers on an issue that might be of real, to the CEO and the CFO. But I'm not sure that TPSU as now currently is going to get that group. But it's
Fred, misunderstood my question a little bit though. My question wasn't getting those folks to the TPSU meetings. My question was, you get the HR professionals and those individuals to the meeting. How do you then transition to the CEO, CFO?
Yes. Okay.
And how has the group been doing that?
Yeah, so that is exactly what we're trying to do. And rather than answer that question and not being one of you, has anybody who done that successfully, who's done a TPSU program, used the relationship with the HR finance person to get to the senior manager?
Hey, Fred, this is Walt. One of the things that I'll tell you is that a lot of the CFOs will get the emails and the blasts from Fred and those guys, and then they'll send their VP of HR to these meetings, and then you build a relationship with them, and they'll set the meeting up with the other people. That's how I've had the introduction to meet those people. So it's been kind of a two-step process versus them coming directly to the meeting. First of all, they don't want to waste their time, so they send somebody else there to see exactly what it's about. And then when they're enamored by all the information, they're like, these people really know what they're talking about. Then they set up an additional meeting. So that's kind of been the way we've done it, Fred.
Thank you.
I can tell you, I've had experience. I call them repeat offenders. And I mean, I've had it happen a large number of times, which is why I have a name for it now. But a lot of times that VP of HR will get it and it's not really something that they're interested in. So they send the generalist. And then the next program you do, the generalist is reported back that it's worthwhile. Then now you got the VP of HR. The VP of HR likes it. And then the third time that they're back, they've got the CFO with them. Okay. So, you know, it sometimes it has nothing to do with you other than the fact that you put on a good program. And they felt like it was important for them to feed it up the ladder. And I can tell you, I've got 3 or 4 clients out of this in that exact same scenario.
And I think that one of the ways that Joe DeNoyer has said he's done that is he's constantly giving materials that maybe not just have to do with the 401k, that they do pass on to the CFO and the CEO. And that was how he got one of his clients, that they did that. And that really worked on that. So, but that's a good question, Todd. Thank you. Any other questions, final ones as we're coming towards the end? Here, comments, ideas, how we can improve on this? All right, I think people are getting hungry, want to eat lunch on that. So Steph, do you want to make any final and wrap us up and take us home?
Sure. I guess to put a bow around it, I would say, you know, we talked a lot about blocking and tackling. We talked about the methodology for obtaining the funding, but don't be bashful about taking advantage of the other things that we have, such as the online courses, and support those, support the use of the online courses that are available to all of the attendees, and use them as your own. So if you're having a conversation with somebody, that's been to a program, they have access to all of our courses that we offer for the designation for the plan sponsors, and they don't have to take all of the courses. But if they have a question specifically about expenses, et cetera, you're going to answer that the way you're going to answer that, but then support your efforts with the online courses that are available, because that's something that others can't do in the industry. And you're going to do all the great things you have. I know Brad does make a big point about the repeat offenders, but you get a lot of mileage out of that, Brad. You do a really nice job with it. And you've got a lot of resources available to you. If you have questions on how you might tie that into some things that you're doing on an ongoing basis on a drip campaign or something, just give us a call or shoot us an email and let us know you want to talk about it for 10 minutes or so, because we can hopefully help you understand how others have used that to their benefit, and you can as well. So, you know, it is a group, it's a group effort, and we're here to support you, and that's a big part of what today's all about. So Fred, I'll turn it back over to you.
We have a very robust and flexible learning management system, and we are thinking about, you know, you're always marketing and trying to get people to come to your website and capture their information. It's not part of the TPSU program, but it's not very expensive, creating private label learning management systems. We already have all the materials, the courses. We have about 15 of them just for plan sponsors. And it could be it'll look like your learning management system. if somebody logs on or uses the system, we'll give you all the information. And if you want to provide them access, whether it's for clients and fiduciary training or for prospects, you can turn it on or off. We have that capability. So rather than, hey, we're great, we market, we have all these services, you can offer online training, and some of those courses actually do have CE credit. So if you're interested in that private label learning management system, contact Dan Hall, and he can, we can hook you up. And as I said, it's not terribly expensive to create that private label. But even without that private label, to Steph's point, if you do have people that are interested in getting access to our courses, that's part of what you get as TPSU. Sorry, Steph. Any final questions? Again, I want to thank, and I'm going to forget everyone on the staff. Steph is involved with the content. Isabella is involved with all of your financial, so setting up and getting the billing. Isabella, our program coordinator. Mark Lester is the associations. RJ Larney is our educational director, so he's in charge of all the recruiting. We have about 12 people on the phones who are calling, but he does the effort from the beginning. Steph is involved overall, but his main focus is on the content on that. DJ Caney is our IT director, and you probably don't have a lot that you need to do from him, but he does all of our data, and he's keeping all of our data up to date and the lists and everything. Diane really supports everyone, logistical support, providers, all the providers know Diane, and so sometimes they'll call her, and sometimes you guys will call her if I'm not available to do that. Am I forgetting anyone, Steph? Nope.
No, I think you have it.
And of course, I want to, my job, or what I try to do in my organization, is whatever job I do, I try to figure out who else can do it and delegate that as quickly as I possibly can. But the one thing that I will not delegate is my relationship with TPSU lecturers. So I want you to know that at any time, as a lecturer in TPSU, or if you're interested in that, I want you to feel free to call me, contact me, any questions, any issues. A lot of times I'll refer you to Isabella or Liz, but and if it's a question about how do I get CE for this, you know, we have those resources. But I do want to make sure that you know that this is the one relationship of all the groups that I do not delegate, and I want to make sure that I am available, and you know that I am available, and that means more than just TPSU questions. If you have a question about the industry, or you know, a particular technical, I may not know it, but I'll know somebody who does. If you're looking to get a connection, know people, get connected to a company or a person. Again, I may not know everybody. I know a lot of people, but I know somebody who knows them. If you're looking for talent and you need to hire, sometimes, you know, we know a lot of people, and we know a lot of people in the market, so we can help you. So I just want to make sure that you know that is available. And I also, I know I'm seeing in the corner, this has been recorded. If any of you have an issue with anything that you said you don't want to, we can try to edit that, but we should have said that in the beginning. But we record it, not that we're going to make this available to the public, so that if you have staff or partners that would like to listen in and get the training, this is available. So this is not going to be made publicly available, but it will be available to staff. So with 1 minute left, and that's the other thing I want to, we try to stay right on schedule with TPSU. Tim knows this, Gary Kleinschmidt. is in the back of the room saying, you know, people don't go to college and the professor goes, you know, 10 or 15 minutes over, you know, they expect you to be on time. So we're going to keep you on time. And during your programs, if you do want to go a little bit later, you want to ask permission and tell people, hey, I need an extra 5 minutes to do it. But I am at the end of my time and I want to make sure we end it. And again, if you have any questions for me, you have my phone number, but it is, I'll give it to you. Actually, I'll put it in the chat box, but I'll give it to you as well. 561-371-4902. 561-371-4902. It is my cell phone, and my email is fred@tpsuniversity.com. I have multiple emails. They all come to the same place. fred@tpsuniversity.com. So I'll put that in the chat room right now. Any other questions, final questions? Okay. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully sometime this year in person. Thank you.